not from this world, but he's one of us now.
No one hurts my guild.
A ninja's heart beats strongest when he finds a family.
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Became the Fairy Guardian of Fairy Tail movie. Before we start, please go support Oza 137,788 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken characters' gender, but of course Naruto is a male. In the past, he was a man known by many names. The Demon Brat, the hero of the 4th Shinobi World War, the 7th Hokage of the Leaf Village. Now, he is known as the very own guardian angel of the fairy tale, an urban legend from the magic world, who goes by the name of Fairy Guardian. Chapter 1. Is this that time of year already? The man voiced his thoughts aloud as he saw a ship approaching the island from afar. You say this as if it's a bad thing. He didn't have to turn around to find out who said that because she was someone he was too familiar with. It is. He grumbled irritably under his breath, but the young lady could hear him very well. Taking on the appearance of a girl in her 13s or 14s, the young woman had very long, wavy pastel yellow blonde hair that reached down to her feet with a single lock pointing upwards. Large green eyes without pupils. Superb skin and a slightly childlike build. She wore a ruffled, layered pink dress with a red ribbon tied in a bow around her neck. Around her chest were 3 blue diamond patterns with 2 blue triangles above them, each set of these outlined in a warm pink. She wore wing-like ornaments around her ears and small hoop earrings. Mavis Vermilion's ethereal body was just feet behind him, her bare feet bearing down on the hot sand. She gazed at the ship carrying the next generation of her proud guild, a warm smile spreading across her face. It had been a year since any of them had last been there, and while she was certain there would be many unfamiliar faces, Mavis couldn't wait to see them. She was, after all, the founder and first guildmaster of Fairy Tail. Don't you want to look? She asked carefully, but Mavis already knew the answer. No. That was his short reply before the man stood up from his position on the beach of Tenro Island and disappeared into the forest without a sound. Mavis didn't try to follow him, not that she could. The smile faded as she drifted off, disappearing from view as first mage, a young man with pink hair, accompanied by a blue cat with white wings and Exeter arrived over the Fairy Tail Holy Land. The annual Fairy Tail class promotion test had begun, and Mavis and someone else were secretly watching her from the shadows, but she still knew so well. This was always an interesting thing to see, especially the test that had taken place 5 years ago. Surprisingly, the rules were exactly the same as last time. For the first test, the candidates and their partners had to choose one of 8 different paths, 4 of which were joined to another path, so teams that met them had to fight each other to continue. Meanwhile, 3 of them had the Fairy Mag's current Tail Class S on them, so to continue further in the test, teams that found them had to fight and win. In the end, there were only 5 out of 8 contestants who passed the first test. The next stage of the promotion test was something new. The remaining participants were given 6 hours to locate and find their tomb, or they would be disqualified. Numerous obstacles made this task difficult, such as the gigantic beasts that dwelled in the forest. Finding the tomb itself was also a great challenge because, first, the master gave no explicit hints or clues as to its location, and second, it was a fake tomb to begin with. The purpose of this test was to challenge the participants' intellect, unlike the first, which was a test of strength and magic. But you really know he's here, right? A voice came from behind her, and Mavis could only nod her head. Her face showed no emotion, but he knew better. The conversation about being in the right place at the right time, he said playfully, leaning his head back against a tree trunk before closing his eyes, folding both hands behind his head. You're not going to do anything. This wasn't a question. No. Again, he answered. They die. Not your problem. As she sat upon a tree branch and peered at the evidence with piercing eyes, Mavis was impressed to see how this had turned out. First, it was the first meeting between 2 brothers, one destined to kill the other. This was a brief encounter, but enough for the older brother to know that his brother was nowhere near ready to carry out his inner goal yet. Then came the arrival of Grimwar Guild, one of the dark guilds of the Balam Alliance, commonly considered the strongest dark guild in the world. Mavis was impressed and horrified to see that the guild master, Hades, was none other than Prek Giebelg, her old friend and also the second master and one of the co-founders of Fairy Tail. Sensing her magical signature and, surprisingly, hearing her voice from over a mile away, even the man who had his eyes rested for the entire time had to let out a sigh and speak, raising his eyes, yet still closing. I guess that's what they really meant when they said you're more likely to die a hero than live and see the day you become a monster. It was so true, and the man believed those words might still apply to him, in some degree. All out, the battle erupted between Fairy Tail and Grimwar Heart, with the target being none other than the legendary Dark Mage currently residing on the island. Fairy Tail's third master, Makarov Dreyer, threatened to cast out Fairy Rite, but Hades showed no fear and easily countered with his own version of the strongest spell of the three great fairy magics, Grimoire Rite. Caught off guard by the true identity of the Dark Guild Master, Makarov shrank down to his original size and was easily defeated by a blast of energy, piercing his body. "Aren't you going to help them?" Mavis had finally decided to ask when the battles all around the island reached their climaxes, with the favor belonging to the mages of the Dark Guild. "No," he repeated, refusing to budge an inch from his position. "But Naruto. From my perspective, they only issue the fine." The man, whose name was Naruto, opened his right eye to look at her. "Moreover, Tenru the tree only does its job of cleaning. That's better, because after all, it was he who made sure of this. Can you see that they're trying to bring him down? Then I'll cultivate it back when it's all over." Giving what Mavis would call an irresponsible reply, Naruto rolled his eyes before smiling smugly at her. "And I thought you were the one who had the most faith in Fairy Tail." Mavis blushed and looked away. "You're the one who had the most faith in Fairy Tail, and that ridiculous power-up of yours, that naive guessing, is something that will never change in your guild." He sneered, ending their argument. When Kana Alberona reached his tomb, Mavis granted her the second spell of the three great fairy magics, Fairy Sparkle, to save her friend. However, because she was unfamiliar with such a powerful spell, the attack was stopped by a mage far superior to her. Luckily for Kana, the Fairy Tail ace, Gildert Clive, who was none other than her biological father, arrived and saved Kana and her friends. What followed was a battle that shook the entire island, and the strongest Fairy Tail mage emerged victorious. There were victories, there were losses, but in the end, when reinforcements had finally arrived, Fairy Tail was able to push back the attacks and secure the Great Tenru Tree and in turn, its own safety. But in an attempt to destroy the Fairy Tail's limitless source of power and its legacy, using his magic tree bow, Gran, Azuma was able to uproot the Tenru tree from the ground. As a result, all the Fairy Tail members began to lose their magic and were unable to move, allowing the Grimoire Heart to gain the upper hand. However, recognizing the power of his opponent, Azuma had left Urza Scarlet, Fairy Tail Titania, unharmed to begin their battle. "She loses," Mavis commented as the next suit of armor broke and fell off her body. "And? You still refuse to help?" Mavis asked, almost in disbelief. Was she the sole reason Naruto was there all those years ago on Fire Island? "At least you can plant the tree back. Like I said, I'll cultivate it back when it's all over." His words clearly showed that he had no concerns about the outcome of the battle. This made Mavis narrow her eyes and frown at the response. "We know who she is, so she'll be fine. Trust me, she'll win." His statement seemed obvious, as well as rather ridiculous, but Mavis didn't object. Surely against a mage of Azuma's caliber, Mavis was still worried about her safety, but she decided to trust him, knowing perfectly well who the woman Naruto was talking about was. The battle continued for another 5 minutes, with the only motivations for being Fairy Tail and her companions being that she kept it on her legs and sword in her hands. Urza fought with everything she had left, and true to Naruto's words, Urza struck Azuma and defeated him. Naruto laughed mockingly at Mavis, who, in turn, laughed smugly because once again, a mage of her Fairy Tail's pride had proven that duty and friendship could overcome anything. However, he was happy for her, but felt a little sad in the end. Such negative feelings appeared and disappeared in just a fraction of a second. He used her and paid too much of a price to his mind. The end of the battle was the most interesting to watch, at least in Naruto's opinion. A bunch of inexperienced brats defeated an old man with years of experience and immense magical power. They had help, lots of help. The arrival of the third master's grandson, who was in a league of his own. The secret mission of the Exceed, who destroyed an organic device called the Devil's Heart, cutting Hades off from his power source. And finally, the restoration of Tenru Tree by Ultier Milkovich, a Grimoire Heart mage who suddenly changed her mind after a conversation and decided to help them. But in the end, this was an impressive achievement for children as young as them. "Where?" "He's on his ship." Naruto gave the answer even before Mavis could finish her question. "Perhaps you should keep your eyes on him for a moment or two, instead of staring at them all the time." He glanced at the airship flying away from Tenru, but his words pointed to Fairy Tail Mag. "Are you sure you don't care about them as you claim?" Mavis asked teasingly, deciding she'd had enough of his dull remarks. "I had the strength to keep my eyes averted when all this came crashing down on my island." He indicated, pressing his claim to Tenru Island. "Moreover, it's funny to see them trying to act tough, and their power of friendship always gave me a good laugh." Naruto commented. They had to learn, sooner or later, that friendship wasn't going to help them overcome everything. As if Mavis could read their minds, she spoke over, "Surely you can teach them something different." "Not going anywhere." He knew what she was trying to do, and he wasn't going to fall for it. "Not in a million years." "So you'll consider it a million years later?" "No." Mavis laughed foolishly. She knew she'd gotten him there. Luckily for him, it didn't last long, because when the Grimwar Hard airship disappeared from sight, he could sense an immense magical power approaching the island from afar. Since she wasn't a normal ghost, Pale Mavis was sensitive because she could sense it too. These here Mavis's eyes widened in shock and horrification. She then turned to Naruto and bit her lower lip when she saw him give no response, showing no concern. For once, Naruto, please just don't lie back and stare so ruthlessly like that. Mavis spoke before he hurriedly drifted off. Looking up, he lifted piercing blue eyes. Naruto could see him approaching. Unlike those who had noticed his presence, Naruto showed no emotion, no fear, no nervousness, or any other kind of concern. The amusement he had displayed when he was approaching Mavis had also vanished, replaced by a blank expression that clearly showed he still didn't care who was coming or what she was truly capable of. On December 16, X 784, Fairy Tail was under the hot rays of the sun when what could be its inevitable end came. This was going so well for them until Acnologia, the Black Dragon of Apocalypse, arrived. But instead of escaping like normal people, the Fairy Tail loaded into Acnologia. The younger generation of Fairy Tail, against the Dragon King of Apocalypse, led by Scarlet Urza, other Fairy Tail members returned to aid Natsu in his assault against the dragon, to protect their master, to protect themselves, as a family. Pouring forth everything they had left within them, the Fairy Tail team attacked Acnologia, reducing wave after wave of magic upon his gigantic body. "You little." Makarov, the third master of Fairy Tail, said in a daze, completely startled by what had happened before his eyes. He had tried to fight Acnologia himself, buying them some time to escape, but he was crushed by the powerful beast faster than he could even see it coming. The moment he was about to face his end, they rose up and attacked Acnologia with everything they had, doing the very thing he, as a father to them all, should be doing. "I want you to know this, Jai-san." Laxus looked at his grandfather and smiled broadly. "I was against this. But do you really think they're the kind of people who can just run away and leave the old geezers behind?" His broad smile turned bewildered as his hands crackled with electricity that could kill dragons. "This is your guild, after all. You idiots." Tears bulged at the corners of Makarov's eyes. He couldn't believe it and he didn't know what to say. He just sat there and stared, sobbing silently. In the middle of the fairy guard, a man stood up from his position and approached the tenru tree, where he placed his hand upon it and closed his eyes. This all came to pass at this moment. Roar. The black dragon roared in anger and stomped its feet on the ground, striking Fairy Van's limbs and making them shrink as if they were mere birds. The Dragon Kings spread their wings and soared into the sky before looking down at the island and opening their jaws, sucking in a powerful gush of air. "Yue." Natsu yelled, falling on top of Lucy behind him. "Is everyone alright?" Urza asked loudly as she stood up from the ground. "None of our attacks work at all," Elfman said through gritted teeth, his sister standing beside him forcing him to deactivate his Satan soul form. "This thing doesn't use the force this thing used when it fought me," Gilder thought as he gritted his teeth, looking up at Acnologia. "This thing is just toying with them. This is a breath attack." Gadgiel shouted as he saw energy begin to swirl around Acnologia's mouth. "Does this think it will ruin the entire island far away?" Kana asked in the crash. "No way. Seriously. Everyone who can use defensive magic, put the power you have into it, now." Urza ordered, pointing behind her group. "Straight." Wendy nodded. "There isn't enough time to draw the stamps." "Released," he muttered. "There's a lot of defensive magic that doesn't require written symbols or seals," the imposition said hurriedly, sweat pouring down his forehead. Even from here, someone could still sense the enormous amount of magic Acnologia was emitting. "Each one, focus all your magical energy on liberated," Lysana shouted. "Those shake hands together." Marahan Strauss said and offered her hands to the nearest person, her brother, as he took them. "We can't let it end here." Natsu shouted and grabbed Lucy's hand, his other hand quickly taking Urza's hands in his. "Good. We'll never give up." Lucy shouted, tears streaming from her eyes. "Each one, join your power together as one." The grey color also participated, holding Juvia and Lucy's hands as the fairy tale supported in a circle. Laxus turned to his grandfather and offered him his hand, laughing softly at the tiny old man whose body was trembling, looking at his children in utter shock. Then, carefully, he placed his hand on the much larger Laxus, and a laugh came to his face. "We'll all go home together," he said. The fairy tale stood in a circle as magical energy blazed around them. "Fairy tale." They suddenly shouted, looking up at Acnologia who then unleashed a gigantic blast from his aspiration. Avis looked at them, unable to stop smiling, despite the sadness visible in her green eyes. The next generation of Fairy Tail fighting against the strongest dragon. Anyone who knew the Dragon King's strength could see that Fairy Tail was fighting in vain, as their attacks did almost no damage to the Black Dragon. The first master clasped his hands and prayed. Their obligations and faith in one another. they were truly something incredible. Mavis could feel it, and she believed. No, she knew they would be more than enough for the final spelling of the 3 great fairy magics to be activated. And suddenly, after she had successfully spelled it out, a hand was placed on the top of her head. My island better not have a single scratch on it, got it? It happened so fast that by the time her eyes had snapped open, he had already disappeared, leaving behind a peaceful swirl of leaves. The entire sky lifted above as Apocalypse's massive attack approached them, the whole of Tenru Island, violently shaken by the amount of magic released by the Black Dragon. Staying far away from my island. It was the last thing the fairy tale members heard before the blinding light of Acnologia's breath attack blocked their vision. Had they been able to see clearly, they would have seen a man with shimmering blonde hair blasting through the air with neck-breaking speed, just as the entire island was completely engulfed in a blazing golden sphere. When he reached his maximum height, Naruto placed his feet on top of the gigantic sphere, using it as a platform to leap even higher and faster into the air, toward Acnologia. However, the force of her leaping was so powerful that it created a shockwave that knocked everyone on the outer fairy sphere back upon impact. Although their eyes couldn't follow her movement, the protected island nevertheless had a different, much more astonishing effect on the people watching from afar, shocked and awestruck. He was pushed back into the ocean, which slams shut at the bottom of the sea. Enveloping his right hand in golden energy, Naruto extended his arm forward, palm open, to block Acnologia's massive roar attack, disintegrating it into smaller beams that shot out in every direction around him. Cocking his other arm to return the blast and balling it into a fist, Naruto continued to push forward until he was out of Acnologia's path, aiming for the dragon's torso before delivering a devastating punch to his chest. His knuckle collided with Acnologia's scale, causing the black dragon to roar in pain. Naruto's fist nearly sliced through its scale like a bullet through human skin, but luckily for him, the shockwave created by the impact knocked him helplessly out of the way, preventing him from regaining his balance before Naruto could drive his fist into its flesh. Acnologia flew, but not with his wings. He tried to flap his wing, but Naruto wasn't that generous. He kept going, somehow flying as fast as he could control, and pierced the dragon again, sending him higher into the air before he fell and crashed to earth. Rolling across the earth, leaving a long trail of destruction behind, they forced Acnologia back into his human form. Taking the appearance of a rather muscular young man with dark skin, bearing the dark markings he had when he was a dragon, and long, dark blue hair, he wore a high-collared black coat and baggy pants, bearing the same draconic markings. He rolled across the ground for a few times before rising to his feet, growling in anger. In a split second, just as he was able to stand at his feet, Naruto appeared directly in front of him in a flash of yellow. His body crouched low, his hand on his hip in a manner similar to a man holding a sword, and he was about to stab him. Panso. A large magical golden circle appeared in the palm of his hand, allowing a sword to manifest in his hand. His eyes widened, and Acnologia tried to attack Naruto and stop him from doing whatever he planned to do. However, every move he made, every decision he made in his mind, was simply a second too late, or particularly not enough against him. Faster than his eyes could follow, Naruto slashed his sword across, leaving no afterimage and, of course, an exceptionally clean cut. Acnologia didn't yet have the chance to recognize what Naruto had cut because the man suddenly threw his sword into the air and fired a shot to grab the Dragon Slayer's forehead and slammed it down to the ground with enough force to split the skull in and create a huge crater on the ground. It was at that moment that Acnologia realized that his left arm had been severed from his body. Blood had begun to flow from the wound on his right shoulder. The pain had finally arrived, and despite it, he managed to utter a single word when he had finally gotten a good look at the man and felt his blood run cold. Standing at 6 feet 3 inches tall and possessing a lean yet muscular build, with spiky blonde hair and bright blue eyes that seemed to glow with raw, pure power, he was dressed in a high-collared white jacket with dark blue arm warmers, worn over a dark-colored shirt and long black trousers, and matching colored sandals. His most striking feature, however, was the faint hair-like markings on either side of his cheeks, giving him a fox-like appearance. It was him, Acnologia thought in horror, the same man who completely destroyed him 400 years ago when he was foolish enough to challenge him. But what impressed him most was her appearance. This never changed in the slightest. He hadn't aged a single day since their last meeting almost 400 years ago. Naruto gave no response. Instead, he reached for his other sword and grasped the blade that was now within arm's reach. Twisting the blade around in his palm, Naruto then gripped the hilt tightly and stabbed down Acnologia's arm, tearing through the flesh of the dark blue-haired man and impaling him deep in the earth. Acnologia groaned in pain, but tried his best to spare him, refusing to show weakness to the man whose powers surpassed all common sense. He finally said with a satisfied smile. Now, if I were in your situation, I'd stay exactly where you are. I only sucked out the flesh, so with proper treatment and a decent amount of time, you can save that arm. As for the other one, well, Naruto removed his hand from the dragon slayer's forehead and mockingly brushed the dust, dirt, and blood off the right side of his cloak near his bleeding shoulder. I can't say the same. And you, what were you doing there? He growled in hatred but wisely kept his body still. He didn't show it with his words but with the dangerous flashes in his eyes which promised. Move a muscle and you'll lose more than just your right arm. Don't you know? The island you attacked, Tenru, is my island. Naruto replied. Unlike Dragnov, I created it, built it, and made it my home. You don't enter someone's house unless you're going to pick a fight. His expression darkened. I don't tolerate disrespect, so consider yourself lucky you didn't lose your other arm or your head. If Mavis were there, she would probably have scolded him for not doing anything when the Grimoire Heart attacked Tenru Island, because he could fix the damage to the Forgotten Heart Grimoire and easily rebuild it when it was everywhere. Acnologia's attack, however, would completely annihilate the entire island. While he could recreate an entire island, making an exact replica of the island, Tenru was a land with a very special origin to him, and Naruto refused to have anything, let alone create something to replace his existence. So remember this to your heart. Stay the buck away from my island. Naruto clicked his forehead and stood up. Turning, he stepped back and pressed his fingers the moment he passed Acnologia's severed arm. You won't need this, I mean, you're still quite the most dangerous threat to the people of this world with only one arm. His arm burst into flames, blew fire, and burned to ash directly in front of his eyes. Leaving Acnologia behind, Naruto walked to the edge of the land, looking at the place where Tenru had been. With the fairy sphere activated, Mavis had ensured the safety of her homeland because nothing, not even time, could do it any more harm. There was no way he could return to Tenru with the fairy sphere still intact. He didn't know how long the sphere would last, but he understood this was going to be a damn long time if the casters had that much faith and trust in each other. And quite sadly, from what he could see, the fairy tale was full of them. What to do? Naruto muttered as he put his hand on his hip and looked around. Last of his era. Naruto Uzumaki was an immortal, after all. He had all the time in the world to decide, after all. End of chapter 1. Chapter 2. Did you find out about the newspapers? It's not just the newspapers, everyone's talking about it. Half a fairy tale mag disappeared in a single afternoon, including the current master and his entire class of magicians. Yes, I heard some rumors that they used to travel to their personal island located somewhere far from the country. That has completely disappeared with them as well. Do you think they are dead? I don't know, other guilds seem to think differently. The Blue Pegasus and Lamia's Ladder are helping the remaining members of Fairy Tail, but I don't think they'll have much luck. Seriously, what could possibly defeat a guild as strong as they are and bring down an entire island with them? Also, what would happen to Fairy Tail now? There were two things Naruto liked about bars. They were always great sources of information, as well as a perfect place to hear people's truthful thoughts on certain events happening around the world. A few cups drunk and then nothing that came out of their mouths was a lie, spoken from the depths of their hearts. It had been 3 days since the fall of Tenru Island and from what he could see, the magic users of the magic world and the civilians didn't take the news too well, which was completely understandable because they were kind of a big deal, being the strongest and #1 guild in Fiori, after all. However, Naruto didn't pay any attention to those words and opinions because he knew better and he simply didn't care. It was he who had hidden Tenru from the world in the first place. Using not only magical barriers but also his more traditional seal hunting techniques, Naruto was able to make his home island impossible to find, no matter what magic or technique was used, blocking it from the watchful eyes of humanity. Even now, deep beneath the ocean, the barriers still did their job, protecting Tenru and the fairy sphere from those who sought the fairy tale. There's no way they could find him anytime soon, but he'd like to see them try. He'd been generous enough to allow Mavis to use Tenru as the holy ground of her guild's pride. There's no way he's going to let her or have any more than this. Taking a gulp of the last of his drink, Naruto stood up, paid for his drinks, and turned to leave the bar. The city where he was currently staying, located in the far east of Fiori, was quiet and peaceful, something he always preferred to a bustling place. However, he never stayed in one place for more than a few months, so he wouldn't attract unnecessary attention. Give me your money, idiot. Without even looking at the hooligan, Naruto raised his arm and elbowed him in the face, sending him flying across the street before he crashed through the window of a local shop. His friends, fellow hooligans, stared at Naruto with wide eyes and walked away in fear, making a path for him to walk through. With a sigh, Naruto left the city and disappeared into the forest. It should be noted that he wandered aimlessly because he hadn't decided where he should go next. 10,000 years had passed and still nothing had changed. There would always be something to expect and everything at the same time, and even without needing to go through and experience it all himself in the past, he knew this to be true. After all, his life had been screwing with him for as long as he could remember, and the lover. He had to admit that while he was truly impressive, he was screwed over at the same time. People hated him then adored him, some secretly loved him, and others saw him as an orange-like idiot who wouldn't stop at having a dozen bowls of ramen every meal. Which was what he used to be, but wasn't the point. Either way, he didn't expect his life to turn upside down so quickly. From angry people with bloodthirsty eyes who chased him out of rage, perhaps just for the amusement of it, to the year he pushed a hand across his chest and later hoped to take control of the entire world and kill him for his pessimistic view of peace. Sadly, that year turned out to be a person he wouldn't call his brother's blood anything. His life finally took a turn for the worse when a war began over him. The Ten Tails was revived, and so was Madara Uchiha, who later received the fastest transgender surgery in history by turning into a woman, who quite frankly freaked him out with her abnormal affection for his offspring. One should always expect something and everything at the same time, but he didn't expect to become immortal. This really impressed him, because he frankly didn't expect to transcend everything else. Imagine his face when he woke up one morning and had everyone tell him exactly what was happening. He took it as hard as anyone who could die could. He drowned in self-pity, in the sadness of the thought of seeing his loved one slowly dying around him, while he alone would be forgotten. It took them no less than a few centuries to choose each other and decided that if he could not die, then courage could too. He witnessed a generation filled with miracles, but also one where blood and hatred slowly died after a long life, and then witnessed the birth of a new one from the ashes of the previous era. It was a generation that knew only peace. Under their watch, they never knew what war was or how much pain and suffering it could cause and bring. But much like the cycle of hatred, something he had hoped to end, he understood that it would never end as long as humanity remained the same. This cycle repeated itself. A new era rose, and a new one took his place. Many times, the cycle continued and seemed to have no end. Quite soon, he grew weary, tired of being a god to his people. Tired of the way they looked at him, the way he had come to like them, and the way they had worried about him forgetting who he was before and after them. And tired of trying to be a hero, all he had done, and in return receiving nothing but pain and suffering. With a heavy heart, he left his home and began to wander the lands as they changed with time. Time passed far more quickly than he had expected, and before he realized it, he had been forgotten. They had even reduced his homeland to the size of an island by the ocean. The same island they now called Tenru. Elemental nations had changed, and while historians only knew that the deepest excavations of ancient times had been completely forgotten by others, the world leader was now called Earthland, and with its name, the knowledge of chakra and shinobi arts had also vanished. Once feared by civilians, magic had risen and become an everyday phenomenon. Even Naruto, who had spent nearly 1,000 years mastering every shinobi art, couldn't resist trying his hand at magic. When he first learned to use magic, he was like a kid in a candy store because the magical elements gave him a thrill unlike any other. This was an interesting way for Naruto to spend his endless time, but it also reminded him of the old days, the time when his first ninja techniques were taught to him by his teachers. Traveling on foot for another 10 minutes, Naruto suddenly came to a stop and decided to speak loudly and clearly from a moment of silence. "You know I can sense your presence from a mile away, so you don't have to call out to let me know you're here." After this, he turned and looked at the young man who had struck a tree. Having arrived at a magical dark entrance only a few feet behind Naruto, the young man was about to call out to get his attention, but quite obviously, it wasn't necessary. "Naruto." "Zeref." Naruto nodded, saying that on reconnaissance, "I can't say I'm not surprised to see you here." The man who had endured it before was none other than Zeref, the strongest dark mage in the history of magic. Despite being a mage renowned for his extremely powerful and dangerous magic for over 4 centuries, Zeref had the appearance of a young man, with black hair and dark eyes. Much like Naruto, Zeref was an immortal, but his immortality came from the contradictory curse of Anksaram, which forced him to live forever. And kill something he desires. This had proven the fact that immortality was nothing more than a curse. When Naruto first encountered Zeref, he was quite shocked to learn that Zeref was an immortal like himself, and after examining everything, he had to admit that he felt bad for the guy because, somehow, the contradictory curse had made Zeref's life worse than his own. However, at least Zeref was killable, so he could still find some peace in the end. Zeref had already planned his death out and had literally created a book about it. "It's been a while," Naruto, Dark Mage said, lowering his head only slightly with a small laugh on his lips. "It's hard to find you these days, but I see you're still doing very well." "Not like you, but thanks." Naruto rolled his eyes, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "How's this going for you? You were kidnapped the last time I saw you, if I remember correctly." "It's nothing important." Zeref shook his head, the laughter almost gone from his face as he approached Naruto. "What's important is that he came and what happened afterward." "You mean Aknoloja?" This wasn't a question. Now that Zareth had mentioned the guy, Naruto couldn't help but wonder what the supposed Black Dragon of Apocalypse was doing, as well as feeling, at this moment. Acnologia had his pride damaged, his oversized ego crushed for the second time, and his right arm lost. They'd have 3 years of the worst things that could happen to a proud man in a single day, after all. He had him coming to try and destroy my house, Naruto said with a bored expression before adding with a satisfied smile. But he didn't get killed like that, and that little country of yours still has something to worry about, but the bright side is that the empire still has the original purpose of its existence. It would be better if you just ended that thing for good. Zareth frowned, but then shook his head with a laugh. But I have to admit that was a true display of strength back there. It's been a while since I've seen you use that much power in a battle, and it still amazed me as much as the first time. I'm just a guy trying to protect his home, nothing special. Naruto scoffed humbly, extending his weapons and tilting his head dramatically. Battle? He wouldn't call it one. A battle was something where both opponents had a chance of winning, regardless of how small they were. He could crush Acnologia without breaking a sweat, not that he could in something like that, so why would he call it a battle when the advantage was clearly his and his alone? Thanks anyway. Naruto raised an eyebrow at Zareth's words of gratitude. For protecting Natsu. I didn't save him, Zareth, it was Mavis. The immortal shinobi indicated, the fairy sphere manifested even before Acnologia's attack could travel halfway to Tenru, so it's Mavis you should thank. Zareth replied with nothing in response, his face showing no emotion, but Naruto could sense a slight shift in his feelings when he mentioned Mavis. Anyway, I saw your little meeting with the brat. This didn't turn out quite as you expected, did it? This didn't work. Zareth admitted, shaking his head sadly. Natsu isn't ready yet. I can barely feel anything when he pierces me. When he comes back, make yourself think you can. I've said it before and I'll say it again, Zareth, so you won't get your hopes up this time either. Naruto turned his head to look at Dark Mage, declaring impassively, I won't train your brother. I'll find someone else to do it. Besides, it's extremely annoying to train brats like him. It's up to you and him to decide who will die first. The immortal black-haired man sighed and looked down. Do you think Natsu can kill me in the near future? Doubt it. Naruto rolled his eyes, but then added, however, maybe. Nothing could happen, after all. There would always be something to expect and everything at the same time. I hope so. The dark legendary mage nodded, chuckling carefully at the thought. This took a few seconds, but he finally decided to ask, what are you going to do now, Naruto, now that Tenru is gone for the time being? I don't know, I think I'll stay here a little while. I don't know how long the fairy sphere will last, but I don't think this is going to disappear in a year or two. He then glanced at Zareth, only for a second before looking away and saying with a smile, his hands in his pockets, but I think I know where I should go next. Zareth nodded his head in understanding. This is actually a surprise to me to see you walking around without her after only taking a step behind, Dark Mage remarked, I hope everything is still alright between the two of you. Don't worry, everything is absolutely fine. It's just that I want her to spend a few years experiencing life with her own kind, not just with me. Naruto said. She listens, she takes out every word and command I say without a second thought, but from me, she won't be able to learn anything. Staying with me, Sayla would be the same demonic servant you programmed her to be, and I don't want that. I see I really should have asked for their opinions before creating it, right? Don't worry, in one way, I like her personality. It's just that she should loosen up a little and start having more respect for herself, like I always did for her. Then I shouldn't waste any more of your time. Zareth laughed. This is the time for me to take my leave. Come to her, Naruto. You don't have to tell me. The immortal shinobi smiled openly. Do you know where she's right now? It shouldn't be too difficult to find her. He shrank in response. She united Tartarus, right? I could detect them, but it's not really necessary. One more thing, regarding. But Zareth had never gotten the chance to finish that question because Naruto had given the answer without thinking. She seems fine on her own. He said expressionlessly before walking away with his hands in his pockets, Zareth leaving the action wondering if he would tell the woman in question about her encounter with Naruto and what he had said about her. Over a period of a few months, Eurasian Says had been defeated by Fairy Tail of Alliance, Blue Pegasus, and Lamia's Scale. Following their final defeat, the guild was disbanded and all its members were imprisoned by the Magic Council. In X784, Grimwar the Heart was the strongest guild in existence, aiming to awaken Zareth, someone who had never had to awaken to begin with, hoping to create the ultimate magical world. This led them to Tenru, where they encountered the Fairy Tail Guild's Class S Mage promotion trial. A bitter war erupted between the two guilds, which Fairy Tail ultimately won, though not unscathed. Most of their strength was decimated by Fairy Tail's mages. While 2 of their core members chose to leave the guild, the rest were killed by the dark mage they worshipped, Zareth, ending the Dark Guild's reign of terror throughout Fiori. However, the falls of 2 of Oration Says and Corazon Grimoire did not end the alliance between the 3 most powerful dark guilds in Fiori. Tartarus was the name of the last guild of the Balam Alliance. Since this was always hidden behind the dark guilds under their control, preferring to control the dark underworld, their very existence was always a great mystery to the people of Fiori, so no one would have imagined the guild being understood above all by Aetherius, an extremely powerful race of demons born from the books of Zareth. Being one of these Aetherius demons, Sayla was a member of Tartarus and its main team. Kyukaman, 9 Demon Gates. Taking the form of a woman, with exceptionally large breasts and the most striking feature being the 2 large golden horns that protrude from the sides of her head and point upwards, Ryajetsutin, the goddess of the cold moon, Sayla was an extremely voluptuous display of unrivaled beauty, approved by her boy Aetherius as the most beautiful demon among them. The wide headband parted the front of her hair, framing her bangs from the hair beneath it. For her outfit, Sayla wore a beige leopard print kimono that was very revealing, featuring black markings on her shoulders. The kimono was cinched around her torso with a thick decorative yellow sash tied behind her back. Her ensemble was completed with thigh-high socks that revealed her heels and toes, a white strap tied around her neck, and a necklace with a crystal gem that hung just above her cleft. Seated in a comfortable armchair by the window of the main hall of the Tartarus Guild building, her legs splayed out across the room, Sayla ignored the attention she received from the lesser demons and focused solely on the book she was reading. Despite being the youngest of Aetherius, Zareth's latest creation, Sayla was by no means a weak demon. Her power was recognized by many, and this was the reason she was able to earn her position among the strongest, Kyukaman. But this was not her beauty or her intelligent mind or her power, which was a form of curse that allowed her to totally control the bodies of her victims and manipulate them as if she were giving the orders that made her special, unique, and different from others. While every other Aetherius possessed an innate drive to kill the creator, established at the genetic level, which was the reason they were created and deliberately expressed as a feeling to return to their side, Sayla was created with the sole purpose of serving her master to the best of her ability and an instinct to put his needs and desires at the top of her priority. Unconsciously, Sayla lifted her hand from the page of her book and reached for the beautiful necklace she wore around her neck. This was a gift from her master, something she treasured as much as she treasured his loving attention. Sayla was worried, as she always had been during the 19 years since she'd last seen him. She knew better than anyone her ability to care for him, but not a day went by that she couldn't stop thinking about him, wondering what he was doing and whether he was happy without her by his side. Serving him, Naruto Uzumaki, was something she took great pride in, so imagine her feelings when he suddenly decided to dismiss her to live with her boyish demons for a few years after more than 300 years of service. She was shocked and horrified when she heard it. She had thought she must have done something wrong or something that had seriously offended him, and on her knees, she had tried to beg for forgiveness. This came as a relief to Sayla when he told her she hadn't done anything wrong and spent the next few minutes comforting her with soothing words. He wanted her to experience life with her kind, and while Sayla had insisted there was no need for such a thing, he refused to change his mind. This was the only time she refused to listen to his words, which sounded more like a request than an order. However, she still wasn't extremely worried, more so for her, but for him. The next morning, she left him and went on a journey to find other demons from Aetherius, who had been gathered by a demon named Margir from Tartarus, according to the will of Final, the strongest demon in Aetherius. Much to her surprise, before she left, her master had given her his necklace as a promise to be the one who would come looking for her in the near future. His necklace, and his promise. They had finally brought peace to her heart, allowing her to continue on her own path without worrying about him, no longer having to employ her. It didn't take her long to find Tartarus, as her activities were very strong at that time. From that point on, she had become an active member of the guild and had proven herself more than enough to be a valuable asset to their goals. But what was bothering him? She had to wonder, because then, he seemed distracted. He usually didn't space out for any reason, and sometimes he'd ask her to stay behind so he could go somewhere else by himself. This worried her, and she had tried to ask him about it, but he changed the subject and began, full of admiration, counting the times as fast as he could move. Thinking this was a personal matter, Sayla willingly stopped bothering him with her curiosity, but she couldn't stop worrying whenever he came back and just went straight to sleep. Perhaps this was the real reason he had decided to dismiss her, not simply because he wanted her to spend a few years with his boy Aetherius. She wasn't stupid, and she had spent enough time with her master to know if he was capable of anything. In one respect, you could say that she understood him better than he understood himself. Carefully playing with the glass with her fingertips, Sayla exhaled eagerly and leaned back against her seat, turning her head to the side to look out the window. Perhaps he would come to her today, Perhaps he would come tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. Either way, she would still happily return to his side again and accompany him for the rest of eternity as his loyal and faithful servant. You seem deep in thought, thinking of your master again. Deep in thought, Sayla didn't realize a demon stood only a foot in front of her until they had spoken over it. Turning her attention back to the front, Sayla's eyes widened for a second before she quickly rose from her seat to greet them with a slight but respectful bow of her head. Ioka-sama. Ioka had a very distinctive appearance, most notably due to her half-human half-aviary features. She appeared to be of average height and weight, yet possessed a remarkably large chest and a curvaceous hergless figure. Her form was covered by a tight pleat of skin that further accentuated her chest, revealing her thighs and partially exposing her buttocks. Her shoulders and arms were concealed by a long, striped jacket with flame-like sleeves, a four-way slit carabiner, and a high, deep collar that completely covered Kyoka's neck. Kyoka's hands, however, took the form of sharp, scaly claws, while a thick pair of ribbons wrapped around her thighs, stopping where a similar set of bird-like feet began. She completed her attire with an intricate helmet featuring a large gem on its brow, which covered almost her entire face, except for her eyes and mouth. Two long, wing-like tufts of hair protruded from the sides, twisting outward around her face. The rest of her hair fell farther back, bundled tightly in a thick ribbon. As Sayla, she was an Aetherius of the Dark Guild Tartarus and a member of the 9 Demon Gates, as well as its leader. Among the members of the Kyuukaman and her guild masters, Kyoka was the one she admired and respected the most, being one of the few demons who possessed power greater than her own, and the one who testified for her when she appeared at the threshold of Tartarus when the rest doubted her due to the differences in their innate desires. Do you read? The green-haired demonstrator laughed as she looked at the book in Sayla's hand. Yes, Kyoka-sama. I found this book quite interesting. Sayla replied with a nod. Is there anything in it that you need? You haven't answered my question. Kyoka leaned forward and looked Sayla in the eye, a malicious laugh crossing her lips. Were you thinking about your master again? The black-haired demon blushed and, with a soft laugh, nodded her head. I should have known. The goddess of the slave planet rolled her eyes. You're sure he still remembers you? It's been 19 years, hasn't it? Sayla sighed inwardly. There she goes again. The master is busy. He'll require my help again as soon as he's done. Whenever the two of them started a conversation about their master, she would bring up the matter, as if she thought Sayla's devotion to her master would change. It was quite obvious that Kyoka was infatuated with her and he was jealous of her exclusive affection for his master. Other than respect and admiration, Sayla felt no particular pity for Kyoka, but over the past 19 years, Sayla had ended up in the upper demon's dormitory and engaged in such behavior with her countless times, more than she could remember. This is a demon's business, so she really couldn't help her. She had a very similar relationship with her master, although her time with him was, in a strange way, much more enjoyable. So was she ashamed to let someone else, a woman, but someone else nonetheless, touch her inappropriately like that? No, she didn't. It wasn't like there was anything special about their relationship. She'd learned from books that men were quite possessive of the women they were in love with, but while he had shown her a great deal of affection, it wasn't like he was in love with her or anything. Besides, while she cared deeply for him and appreciated the attention he gave her, she had never seen herself as his lover. She was his servant, and he was not her master. Nothing more, nothing less. But suddenly, Sayla frowned and became worried. Isn't there anything wrong with this, right? Right? The saying goes, but you still have the doubt, huh? Kyoka smiled contentedly. Even though she noticed his frown and worried look, she had them mistaken for something else. Is there something you need there, Kyoka-sama? The goddess of the cold moon quickly changed the subject, feeling the need to go along with someone like Kyoka. Yes, I need you to carry out this mission for me. Kyoka replied, as you already know, Grimwar Heart has been demolished by the fairy tale. Sayla nodded her head in understanding. News of Grimwar Heart's fall was all over the human newspapers, and while she could never bring herself to read one because they were so boring, she had heard some lesser demons gossiping about it. This was a genuine surprise, but startling. Good, we need to make sure the dark guilds under your control remember where they belong. I'll need you to examine each of them to ensure they know their place. If they try to do anything suspicious, you know what to do. Sayla nodded her head seriously. I'll go to my space to prepare and leave as soon as possible, she said, bowing her head to the green-haired demon. Well. Kyoka laughed. Remember, I expect nothing but success from you, Sayla. After bidding farewell to Kyoka, Sayla quickly made her way back to her space. She had a mission, and she intended to accomplish it to the best of her ability. Opening the door, Sayla walked into her space and closed it behind her. It was at that moment that Sayla felt a presence behind her, and without thinking, she turned and pushed her palm forward. Hey. Say, whoa. The person said in surprise and quickly dodged his head to the side, his hand harmlessly passing his head and striking the wall behind him instead. That part of the wall was completely destroyed, and the force of his attack made the rock space slightly warp. "Are you angry?" he asked jokingly as his eyes widened in shock. "Master?" she exclaimed in happiness, but then horror washed over her when she realized she had tried to crush his head, not that she could, and immediately dropped to her knees and lowered her head so low that it touched the floor. "I'm so sorry for trying to attack you. Please forgive me." "That's fine. This is my flaw, for starters," Naruto said as he knelt down and placed his hand on her shoulder to lift her up. "Please lift your head. There's no need for you to bend over." "Master, you're here," she said, looking at him for a second before throwing herself at him, wrapping her arms tightly around his shoulder. "I've missed you so much," she said happily. "It's been so long." Smiling broadly, he hugged her back, returning her heartfelt welcome. "I've missed you too, Sayla," he said as he rested his head against hers, taking in the scent of attraction he liked and omitted so much. "I'm sorry for the long wait you've had this long," he said, gently stroking her hair before pulling her close to capture his lips in a scorching kiss. Of course, this wasn't the first time he'd kissed her, but this surprised her every time. This made her heart flutter, and soon, Sayla found herself kissing him back with hardly as much passion. After a minute, Naruto pulled away and laughed at her. Was Sayla as beautiful as he remembered her to be? "How have you been?" "I've been doing well, master." Sayla laughed. "I did as you commanded. I found other Aetherius demons and came to live with them," she said before asking, "How did you find me, master?" "But this necklace." Her hand reached out and touched the gem on her necklace. "This is a special gem that responds to my chakra, so I can sense you even if you're halfway across the world. I've also added a special seal to it, making it a marker for the technique. You wear it and I can find you no matter where you are and come to you in an instant." "The master?" She laughed softly, brushing the pink dust off her cheeks. "You've changed, Sayla." Naruto laughed as he looked at her with piercing eyes. But then, he frowned. "Do I owe you an apology, Sayla? I really shouldn't fire you against your will like this. It's just." "Please don't say this, master." Sayla interrupted and placed her hand on his cheek. "You have your reasons, and I respect that as much as I respect you." Naruto sighed, but laughed at her nonetheless. "Are you free right now?" he asked, and Sayla uncomfortably shook her head. "What is it?" "Tartarus wants me to go to the dark guilds that were in control of the Grimwar Heart to remind them that we're still here." Naruto nodded in understanding. "The Grimwar Heart, they. I know what happened to them. I was there and I saw it." Naruto shrank back, making Sayla's eyes widen in surprise. "To tell you the truth, I couldn't care less about it. Anyway, dark guilds, huh? Do you mind if I continue?" "You don't do." "I don't have to because I want to." Naruto smiled broadly. "We have so much to catch up on, and I'm dying to hear your stories with Tartarus, so why waste any more time?" "The W is fine if you insist." It's just like what he said. They had a lot to take. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3. The category with its back against a tree, Naruto crossed his weapons over his chest and watched the fire building before him slowly crumble down to the ground. The door was then smashed apart and Sayla came striking from the Dark Unicorn Guild building with a calm and hard expression on her face, but this didn't last long and immediately softened when she saw him standing outside, waiting for her. "Did I keep you waiting, master?" Sayla asked as she stood before him, playing apologetic. "Nah, don't worry, it's fine." Naruto shook his head and then noticed a small smear of blood on Sayla's left cheek, probably from one of the dark mages she'd killed in the nearby range. There holding on with a small laugh on his face, Naruto reached for his hand and carefully cupped her cheek, keeping her head still so he could wipe the bloodstain from her face with his jacket sleeve. "I guess the negotiation didn't go too well, did it?" As Sayla blushed at his affectionate attention, her immortal master turned his eyes to look at the burning building and saw it had completely collapsed. "Those people really didn't agree with the way we controlled the underworld. What's more, they despised me and tried to touch me. This was a complete waste of time, so I ended their stories." Sayla looked at him and answered sincerely, making the blonde man laugh silently with amusement. "The Dark Unicorn is a weak guild anyway, so even if they accept my offer, I don't think they'll have much use for Tartarus." She said unpleasantly, but then realized that Naruto was wiping her cheek, but nowhere was he holding her face in his hand. "Master?" she asked in confusion, looking directly into his eyes. She saw the love in them, the same love he always had for her after she came to his side. "You are very handsome, do you know that?" His question surprised her. These were just simple words meant to compliment her facial features, which he always described as stunning, but of all the words he could say to her, they were the least of her expectations. This wasn't the first time he'd said those words to her, and she didn't expect it to be the last. But for the first time ever, she felt the weight and depth of his words, the real reason why he always said them with such love and affection. The Aetherius. For the past 19 years, they had lavished praise on her beauty more than she could remember. Among them, she had the least facially striking feature of a demon, other than the horns atop her head. This made her look more human, the race she had come to hate with a passion, but the demons didn't seem to mind, and neither did she. Kyoka, of course, had Sayla complimented multiple times. She was the only one besides her master who had seen more of the cold moon goddess than just her face and the generous amount of hex appeal that her clothes could barely conceal. However, now that she thought about it, she couldn't help but notice the difference between her master's and the Aetherius's praise, especially Kyoka's compliments on her beauty, as well as how she felt about them. Although she would never have shown this, Sayla allowed herself to be easily impressed by their praise, as she took great pride in her appearance. Other than this, she felt nothing. She was beautiful, possibly the most beautiful Aetherius female, so it was natural for them to find her beautiful and attractive. Even the humans she had taken great pleasure in killing couldn't avert their disgusting eyes from her. But when this came to his master, it was a whole different story. In no case was she the only one to whom he had given those words. Having accompanied him for more than 3 centuries, she had watched him fall in love with many women, as he had a tendency to fall in love with women for whom he spent a great deal of time and recite the same words more than any of them could remember, but in a strange way he always made his meaning more special than any of them. Why? She didn't understand. Her heart warmed every time he did this. This brought a laugh to her face for no reason, making her feel butterflies in her stomach. Butterflies in her stomach. Sayla almost chuckled at her for using the strange human definition. She'd read about it in one of her boring books, and she'd never really understood the definition until now. Was it because she had been in love with him, her master? The romance novels she had read over the years had given her the answer, but she didn't trust any of them, she didn't like any of them to begin with, but she always forced herself to read them for 2 reasons. The first being the limitation of the demon library, as most demon books had been made in Aetherius, and the second being that, as her master, she might understand him better, since he had once been human. She felt so many compassions for her master, respect, admiration, reverence. But she still didn't know if love was among them, or if she could have the honor of calling herself his lover. She didn't know if it was possible for Aetherius, like her, to develop anything outside of how they were programmed, but whenever she was around him, she felt dizzy and supremely happy. Sayla always kept her behavior behind a calm mask, but whenever she addressed him, she felt the mask slip, and she began to act not so much different from a female human who was madly in love with someone. Love was always a strange concept to Sayla. For 300 years, she had accompanied him across the world, yet she had never given it a second thought. They were close, but was love a feeling they could truly share? The master cared for her deeply, but was that his love for her? Or was it something more? Was this how he always treated his servants? He was a god to an entire era, so she wouldn't be surprised if she wasn't his first servant or the first on his long list of servants who had the honor of keeping his bed warm with their bodies. In particular, immortality. This is the one thing that made her more special and different from them. Should she admit that she didn't really care whether he was in love with her or not, but if she were truly in love with him, then so be it, but it still wouldn't make any difference to her position as his servant, right? Right? For the second time that day, she doubted her. She almost chuckled at this. The cold and calculating Ryajetsutin was being confused by his own feelings. It wasn't something one saw every day. Lost in thought, deep in her own world, Sayla didn't realize that the two of them had been staring at each other for a while, but the next second, when she blinked, she felt his lips on hers, kissing her gently. Sayla was rather surprised, but she kissed him back nonetheless. Wrapping his arms around her neck and parting from her lips, she closed her eyes and let him deepen the kiss as he pleased, moaning softly as his tongue explored her mouth once more. His hands tangled in her hair, and she felt them slide down to her hips to pull her closer. They stayed like that for a while. Even after Naruto had stood up, Sayla continued kissing him. Naruto had no other choice but to stay with her for longer. He wasn't too bothered about it because he always enjoyed the feeling of her lips on his, especially when she put so much effort into the kiss. And suddenly, still kissing him, Sayla removed her hands from the back of his head and moved them down to his pants. Before he could do anything, Sayla had already unbuttoned them. She was about to take the rest off after she pulled down the zipper, but Naruto decided to stop her by grabbing her shoulders and gently pushing her back, but not too hard so she wouldn't misunderstand his intentions. "Whoa whoa, put it down right there, girl," Naruto said as he looked at Sayla, whose eyes widened as she finally realized what she had tried to do. "The master, I am like this of course," she would try to apologize in a panic. He had expected hardly so much from her beautiful demonstration that he always tried to apologize whenever she thought she had done something wrong. "No, it's fine, I don't care. It's not like I don't want to do it with you or anything, but now's not the time for it. He then raised his hand and pointed toward the completely destroyed building in front of them. Besides, we're not in the right place either. You only killed a bunch of people whose corpses were only a few feet away from us. Slaughtering most of your enemies and then having Hex right there on our next to their corpses would just make us look like a couple of psychopaths, you know. He was immortal, and he had been many things. But a psychopath definitely wasn't one of them. Although, Naruto would admit that he had lost his sanity a few times in the past due to the harsh life of an immortal. Quickly zipping up his pants and fastening the belt around his waist, Naruto glanced at Sayla and saw the worried expression on her face. Laughing, Naruto leaned forward and kissed her again, much to her surprise. Just don't stand there. Taking a step back, Naruto grabbed her hand and pulled away, throwing himself at her. You're just going to get your mission for Tartarus done, then we can go somewhere more private. I promise you won't wear any of your clothes when we get there. He winked playfully, making Sayla blush. If that's what you wish, master. Sayla nodded her head, finally bringing laughter back to her face. So Sayla, tell me about Tartarus. Naruto asked, how did they treat you right as they traveled through the forest? Were you able to make any friends there? Yes, master, they treated me very nicely. Sayla answered sincerely. Although, I wouldn't call any of them my friend. While we're friendly to each other, the concept of friend doesn't really apply to us. Naruto nodded his head in understanding. Fair enough, he guessed. The lesser demons respect me for my strength, and I also have some respect for those stronger than me. The Kyuukemen are the only ones I usually communicate with, so I don't know much about the others. Not that she cared about any of them. Tell me more about them then. Well. Jackal-sama is a boisterous demon who takes great pride in his curse, so I don't really enjoy his company, much like Franmath-sama, who can be quite excitable and impatient, and Ezel, because he has very little respect for me as well as no dignity. Tempester-sama and Kiz-sama are both calm types, while Tarafuser-sama is the most serious of the 9, so I really enjoy working with him. Silver is a new member of our team, but I enjoy his company the most. We usually sit and have pleasant conversations with each other. He's also a great listener, so I usually tell him stories about my travels with you. Well, the guy seems nice, I might try to find an opportunity to meet him sometime. Naruto nodded before making the request. Okay, this has 7 years of them, as for the last one. Ioka-sama is the leader of the 9 demon gates, and she's the one who's been the kindest to me, and the one I have the most respect for. Sayla laughed. She testified for me when I reached the threshold of Tartarus. Since we have different goals, another Aetherius didn't have much faith in me back then. I'm very grateful for what she's done for me, so I've tried to repay her as much as I can. Refund? How? Naruto asked with interest. I perform every task she asks me to do, and… She stopped, unable to bring herself to say it. And? I'm not important, love. She replied, unable to bring herself to look at him when he looked at her. She had never thought too seriously about it before because she believed he wouldn't care, as it wasn't anything serious. Now, she thought differently. She was afraid of how he would react to her answer. What is wrong with her today? Answer me, Sayla. Naruto continued crossing his weapons over his chest. This is an order. Sayla swallowed nervously. I have Hex with her whenever she ever asks me. She said it very quickly, but she was nowhere near fast enough. Naruto blinked once, then twice. He heard it very clearly, but decided to ask anyway, forgive me. What is this again? Swallowing, Sayla steeled her nerve and replied, I have Hex with her, whenever she asks me to. I'm the master, so pathetic. She added quickly, lowering her head in shame. So, you have Hex with her? Naruto asked. Many times in the past 19 years. Yeah. Sense good. Ioka-sama's curse can be used to increase the sense of pleasure, so she immediately slapped her hands over her mouth in horror. She looked up and saw her master smiling mysteriously at her with half-up eyes, his satisfaction mysteriously satisfied. Master, she stammered nervously. Why are you so nervous, Sayla? Naruto asked with a bright laugh, too bright for her liking. You shouldn't worry too much about it. I'm not mad at you or anything. He leaned forward and looked into her eyes, their faces only an inch apart. Kyoka is the one who should be worried about her life, because I'm going to kill her for touching her inappropriately. Sayla gasped in horror, but then he continued, wait, I'm going to have you kill her because the look on her face is going to give me so much fun. Was it possible? How could Kyoka be stronger than Sayla? The big deal, he could make her 10 or hundreds of times stronger than Aetherius was, finally, stronger with his chakra, let alone a mere demon like Kyoka. Sayla tried to open her mouth to speak, but when she saw the earth beneath him and around them cracking and the wind beginning to gather uncontrollably under the pressure of a fragment of his power, she knew he was angry and there was nothing she could say to change his mind. She didn't want Kyoka to die, not because the two of them had shared some intimate moments in her bedroom, but because she was an Aetherius boy. Humans killed each other for their own gain, but almost every Aetherius demon shared the same goal, the same dream, something they wanted to accomplish together and for which they had a mutual respect. Even though Sayla was created for a different purpose, she knew how this seemed to be driven by inner desire. She understood their devotion to their goals, so she didn't want any of them to die before they could achieve them. However, if this was her master's order, and he rarely gave his orders, then she would carry it out without question, and to the best of her ability. Then so be it. Sayla lowered her head, calmly declaring, "I will carry out your order this instant, master." She turned and was about to walk away when suddenly Naruto shot her hand and grabbed her wrist, stopping her from going any further. "Relax, I was just kidding." Naruto chuckled quietly, causing Sayla's jaw to drop in shock. "I won't kill her, or have you kill her." Her expression immediately improved. "Really, love? Other than the fact that you were doing it behind my back, which I don't like one bit," her laughter subsided, "I'm not worried about this so much. Maybe it's because Kyoka is also a woman and I'm kind to that girl about the girl thing, you see, but maybe it's because it's something I really deserve to take my eyes off you for more than a second. The master, you." But he raised his hand and stopped her from saying anything else. "I really shouldn't fire him, but then again, it's not like I have any other choice." Naruto mumbled the last part to him, so Sayla wasn't able to hear him. "So having Hex with her really felt like, huh, good?" he asked, giving her a teasing laugh that made her blush. "Think you might introduce me to her? A threesome, maybe? Amo? Ah, I know you like that idea." Naruto smiled broadly, placing his hands on both of their cheeks. He could feel their blush quite clearly. Who would have thought that their usual calm and aloof servant could blush like a teenage girl like that? "Please stop teasing me, master." Ah, then she could make a request as well. It seemed her decision had turned out better than he thought. Anyway, she needed a reminder, and he knew exactly how to remind her. "Sayla." He suddenly moved his head and turned his eyes forward, ensuring she was looking directly into his eyes. "Do you know what I want to do next?" "Unfortunately not, master." Sayla shook her head. Smiling contentedly, Naruto leaned forward and whispered in her ear. Aetherius immediately blushed a red beet. "The master of M it is." The demon stammered nervously. His face, which felt so hot that only she knew it, had turned a bright shade of crimson and glowed almost visibly, even in the broad daylight. She could also feel his heart pounding hard and fast, accelerated by the filthy thoughts that scanned his mind. However, she was no less excited. "So you really like this, huh?" Naruto asked, his smug smile becoming sly and widening. "So what do you say? Screw into your mission and let your master remind you of his awe-inspiring power that no enhancement magic can hope to match." "If that's what you," but Sayla never had the chance to finish answering. Everything happened so fast that she actually felt a little dizzy. She was seized by her master, while at the same time her surroundings changed faster than a blink. Then, her clothes were ripped to shreds by his hands and shrieked as she was jolted onto a decent-sized bed. She turned, and he was already on top of her, their lips crashing together before he forced his hands above her head. With just one hand, he pinned her wrists together and let her hand roam free over her bare forehead, feeling her smooth skin and the incredible softness of her firm, heavy chest. When his master whispered in his ear, he had promised his two things. Intense pleasure. And incredible pain in the time they were made and cared for. She knew better than anyone that Naruto Uzumaki would always keep his promise, no matter what. One thing is for sure, in the end, she wouldn't be able to think of someone or something, but he would. It's something she was really looking forward to. Time jumped 7 years later. 7 years had passed since the day Tenryjima, Tenru Island, had sheltered protectively within one of the three great fairy magic. The fairy sphere completely disappeared from the surface of Earthland, bringing stronger fairy tale mags down to the deepest part of the sea with it. Fairy Tail, once the strongest guild in Fiori, had become the weakest mage guild in the country. Without their former income, the guild fell too near bankruptcy and could no longer afford to save their building, which they forced into execution shortly afterward. After they left, the remaining members of Fairy Tail moved into a small tavern on the edge of town and made it their base of operations. 7 years, huh? Wakaba, a member of Fairy Tail, wondered aloud as he extinguished the smoke from his cigar. "It's really hard for me to believe it's been this long." "The good old days," Max said as he sighed longingly. "What really takes me back?" "Nothing has been the same since then," Warren declared, weeping as he looked at the paintings that had fallen to the ground after the new guild in town, the Twilight Ogre, had come and ruined the place. After studying the horrific new discovery, the remaining members of Fairy Tail had tried to find their family with everything they had, but none of them were found. All kinds of different organizations had joined the search, but none of their efforts had yielded anything. The Magic Council had informed them that it was Acnologia who had eradicated the entire island. This had shaken them to their core and crushed all their hopes because they all knew the story of the legendary dragon who single-handedly destroyed an entire continent. It was simply that no living human would be able to take on that dragon. Suddenly, while they were still in the midst of their tearful moment, they all heard a loud booming sound coming from above them. "What is this?" Droy asked in confusion. "Is the ogre coming again?" Motor asked, growling in frustration. Hurriedly, Mag ran out of the guild hall and looked up, only to have their eyes widen when they saw the Blue Pegasus Guild's magic airship, Christina, floating above them. Before any of them could say anything, an expressed shout from the ship, for whatever reason, getting louder and louder before the second men. Suddenly, an object crashed to Earth with a terrifying impact, startling Fairy Tale's members. Looking back at the small crater that appeared once the dust had finally settled, everyone's eyes widened in shock when they saw it was the infamous Ichia of the Blue Pegasus lying on his side in the crater. "Just for you, Fairy Tale," he said, pointing towards them. Appearing to be natural from the fall, "I'm Ichia. We understand how you feel, Ichia-sama, but won't you settle down a little?" Another voice came from above. "We could have floated down with my wind magic, you know, Ichia-san," an irritated voice said. "It's been for a while, each of us." A third voice could be heard afterward, this one softer than the previous three. The three men gracefully landed on Earth, revealing themselves to be the famous Blue Pegasus Triman. Hibiki, Nguyen, and Eve. "Why is the Blue Pegasus here?" Motor asked in total confusion, but not paying attention to his question, the Triman gathered around Laki, currently the only female fairy mage in the guild, and started flirting with her. "You are so beautiful, Laki-san," Hibiki said as he stroked the lavender-haired girl's head. "Those crystals, this really pleases him," the Nguyen said with a slight blush, adding another compliment. Thank you," she said nervously, unable to think of a better response. "Could you guys stop flirting and tell us why you're here?" Max shouted loudly. "Stop this right now, men." Ichia intervened after the rebellion at his feet. "Please forgive us," the Trimen said in harmony as they bowed their heads in Laki. "Please forgive us." "Why are you still here?" Warren asked. "We did it," Ichia said, dusting himself off and striking from the crater. "Something corresponding to Christina's movement characteristics that we have recorded in the information files has been discovered in Ethernano de Fiori that Lee." Hibiki began with a small laugh. "What does this mean?" Ichia said energetically as he pointed his hands forward. "Tenru Island still exists." The members of the entire fairy tale could only stand there in shock at the news, while several miles away, a certain blonde immortal awoke from his slumber when he sensed something he had been all too familiar with. "Is this the time, huh?" Naruto said as he moved away from the woman sleeping beside him and got out of bed. Moving to the window, the blonde grabbed the curtain and carefully moved it to the sides just a little so that it would give him just enough room to look out at the world outside, but not wide enough to allow sunlight in and ruin his lover's sleep. 7 years. It had been 7 years since the day he kicked Tenru into the ocean. He'd never admit it or say it out loud, but he had to give Mavis and her brat some credit because the amount of magical power that was covered, their obligations, and their faith in each other were simply exceptional. Even he couldn't have done any better. "The master, what is he doing wrong?" A laugh made its way to his face as he turned his head and saw Sayla sitting on his bed with the cover only concealing her body from the waist down, leaving her entire upper body out of his view. "Did I wake you?" Naruto asked when the beautiful demon yawned sleepily and rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand. He always enjoyed a good sleep, but unlike her and the human, he didn't have to sleep as much, so even after having sex with her all night until 7 in the morning, he felt completely fine. "No, master." Sayla shook her head and got out of bed as well, letting the cover fall over her body. She made her way to him before wrapping her hands around his torso and pressing her body against his. Since he was much taller than she was, her head could only rest against his chest. "Does something bother you, master?" "It's nothing like that." Naruto shook his head and wrapped his weapons around it as she tilted her head back slightly to look at him. "Can you stay here for a while? There's something I need to do." "Yes, love." Sayla laughed, nodding her head. "But please come back as soon as you can, I'll be so lonely without you." "Is it a lawsuit?" "This is a request, master." Sayla giggled foolishly, and at the same time, Naruto chuckled softly before lowering his head to gently kiss her lips. The rental was over. Naruto turned and gathered his clothes, which Sayla had scattered all over the room the night before. Putting them on, Naruto turned to look at Sayla and saw her doing the same to him, putting on her black kimono. The previous kimono had been destroyed by him 7 years ago, but the current one was no less of a revelation, and placing the headscarf on top of her head to keep the ribbons away from her face. "Make breakfast if you can, it shouldn't take too long," Naruto said as he put on his jacket and disappeared in a flash of light. Sayla stared at the spot he had just been enduring with a worried expression. Did he forget that she didn't know how to cook? With a laugh on her face, Mavis Vermilion outstretched her weapons to her sides and allowed the fairy tale Holy Land, Tenrajima, to shelter within the burning golden fairy sphere, resurfaced from the bottom of the ocean, startling everyone who looked from a ship not too far from her. After gesturing for them to follow her by the hand, Mavis turned and flew away. The fairy tale wizards got their boat onto the beach and tried their best to catch up to her, but she simply drifted away too fast for any of them to follow. Pretty soon, she disappeared from sight, but when the group tried to search for the girl, they weren't able to find something, or rather, someone with a familiar pink-haired mop buried under the dirt. "Natsu?" Mac said as the rest gasped in shock. As fast as he could, he ran as fast as he could and got to the side of the fire dragon slayer. After giving him a quick check to make sure he was still alive and breathing, he grabbed his shoulder while Motor and Droy tried to pull him off the ground. "Natsu, get you. Wake up, you bastard," Warren yelled. "What? Closed." Natsu roared and broke free from the ground, ready to fight. "Natsu? Wahh." The engine, Warren and Droy screamed and launched themselves at it with their weapons wrapped tightly around Natsu's neck, bringing him in a gigantic bear hug to his crash. From afar, Mavis watched, laughter never leaving her face. Any last words? But in the next second, Fairy Tale's first master shuddered and forced a laugh into her laughter when she heard his voice and felt something pointy touch the back of her neck, which shouldn't be possible because she was a ghost, and something that wasn't spiritual would simply pass right through her. But anyway, she knew all too well that only he was capable of doing something like that. "That was a long time, you little brat." Beep. The blonde squealed in shock as she was grabbed by the back of her dress and lifted into the air. "P put me down, Naruto. I thought we were over this by now." She whined like a child, swinging her weapons around as she came face to face with him. "You've gotten over this, I, meanwhile, haven't." He twisted the kunai around and clicked his nose with the curved end of the blade, making her grimace and puff out her cheek in annoyance. "You cheeky brat. Do I have to remind you again that this is my island? But I was born here." She crossed her arms over her chest and declared clearly. "Excuse me, but did Tenru make your island?" he asked with a deadpanned expression, but Mavis just stuck her tongue in his. Naruto then dropped Mavis, much to her surprise, making her get over her end. "Alright, brat, I'll give you 2 minutes. You get those people off my island, or I'll do it myself." Okay, geez, there's no need to be such a jerk." Mavis stood up, rubbing her end. "At least it gives me a few more minutes to properly greet you all." "What oratory? Why don't you come with me?" "No," Naruto stated coldly. "What about Urza? Don't you want to see her again this time after all?" 2 minutes, no more." Putting his hands in his pockets, Naruto replied in the same tone, staring off with a blank bored expression on his face. "Jerk. Brat. You heartless bastard. Dwarf. Yes. Is she trying to imitate Zera?" Naruto thought before smiling with satisfaction. "Do you still know what that word means? Are you really questioning my intellect?" Mavis frowned as she crossed her weapons over her chest. "Time to move, the clock is ticking." She saw him wave his hand dismissively, urging her to move as quickly as she could. However, the moment she turned her head back, a quick plan formed in her mind. She smiled wickedly with satisfaction. When the lost members of Fairy Tail had been awakened, Mavis stepped forward and cleared her throat, making herself known to each one. "Hello everyone." She greeted them gently, a warm laugh spreading across her face. "I'm so happy to finally meet you all for the first time. My name is Mavis, the first Fairy Tale Master, Mavis Vermilion." She introduced herself, causing the fairy tales, except for the current master, to scream in shock. "How?" Urza said in surprise, looking at the first master with wide eyes, much like all the others. "I passed away long ago, so this is merely an ethereal body," she replied, closing her eyes. "Then I took the strength of everyone's obligations and faith and transformed it all into magical power." All her thoughts allowed one of the 3 great fairy magics, the fairy sphere, to be activated. This is an absolute defensive magic that will protect the guild from any evil. However, each one was sealed in a frozen state even though it has been released, a span of 7 years has passed. They all gasped. This was 7 years of nothing. "What now? So he was the first one who protected us?" Makarov said between tears, smiling openly at the young woman with long golden hair. "It's nothing. Since I channeled everyone's strength into magic, I had to give it my all." Mavis laughed. "Strong faith and resilient obligations will still bring miracles to your side." She then looked at them and laughed, her head tilted to one side. "This makes a wonderful guild, Tercio." "It really is, Mavis-sama." Makarov laughed back at her and they all nodded their heads in agreement. Meanwhile, Naruto checked the time. It had been 2 minutes and 10 seconds. That was just enough time for him to kick them off his island. He had plenty of ninjutsu to wash them away, but a tropical storm should be more than enough. Before you go, there's someone I'd like to introduce you all to, Mavis suddenly said, causing Naruto to stop channeling his chakra. While I was the one who created the fairy sphere, he made sure that your Acnologia is safe. Mavis continued intensely. His name is Naruto Uzumaki, and he is. But before she could finish her introduction, Naruto appeared right next to her and slammed his right fist into the top of her head. They're happy now? Naruto asked in annoyance as he glared angrily at Mavis, who was clutching her head in both hands, tears threatening to fall from her eyes. With a sigh, he turned his head and looked at the fairy tale members, who were staring at him with wide eyes. With a quick scan, he was able to recall all their faces and the rest of their facial appearances, something he had disregarded 7 years ago in favor of his battles. His attention shifted to Natsu for a second time before stopping at Urza. Urza almost shuddered. She could have sworn that he, Naruto Uzumaki, was right about her. She believed they had never met before in the past, and yet Urza Scarlet could sense something very familiar about him. Curiously, she felt a warmth when she looked back on him. He gave her the warm, heartfelt feelings of the people who had cared for her and shaped her into the woman she was now over the past 19 years, and she wasn't thinking of Makarov. Sure, he had been nothing more than a grandfather to her after she joined the fairy tale, but it was the people who came before him. Before she joined the fairy tale who gave her all those feelings. He also looked a lot like someone she used to know. The Naruto cleared his throat to break the silence before the refrain, since this little runt's already spilled the beans, you guys already knew my name, but I think a proper introduction should be included. He pointed at Mavis before placing both hands behind his rear, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm a member of Fairy Tail. The owner of this island. The immortal shinobi and the first Fairy Tail master finished their introduction simultaneously, causing each to gasp in surprise. Naruto turned his head slightly to the side and glared angrily at Mavis, who stuck her tongue out at him before breaking into a white intense smile. What did you mean when you said you owned this island? Makarov was the first person to ask. It's not Tenru. Mavis's house, but my ancestor was here even before her. We owned this land before you villagers came here and dumped your trash. This is our birthright. Naruto replied expressionlessly, lying through his teeth. However, his statement wasn't entirely untrue because his ancestor had been there before her and even before him. Is he telling the truth, Master Mavis? Mira asked. Naruto turned to look at the girl in question and silently promised unimaginable pain and humiliation if she dared to spill the whole truth. Yes, it's him. Mavis Vermilion nodded. Hold on tight, you're a one-tailed fairy mage. Laxus decided to ask. He was the oldest member of the current younger generation and yet he'd never seen Naruto before and didn't he look a bit older than him? But I've never seen him join our guild before. I've been staying here for most of my life, Naruto said shortly after. But. For most of my life, Naruto repeated, interrupting the lightning dragon slayer in the same tone, the oratory of which, lives are given. Welcome here, then I'll give you 30 seconds to get on that boat. He pointed his hand in the direction of the boat on the beach and move your donkey from my island before I make the ride for you. He sounds like Perusica. Natsu shouted. If you compare me to some old hag, Naruto clasped his hands together and formed a hand seal, something that was not unnoticed by a certain redeed, immediately causing the sky to darken with lightning that violently cracked across the clouds, making Fairy Tail consider the shock, then I guarantee you that I'm nothing like this Perusica. Whoa, how does he do this? Natsu said as he looked up at the sky. This is awesome. Aya, this isn't impressive. Lucy cried as one of the lightning bolts struck the spot next to her. They're going to come out here. Yes, I think this is time for us to leave. Makarov nodded and was about to follow, but stopped when he saw Urza raise her hand to stop them. Please hold on for a second, Master, Urza said as she took a step forward. I want to ask you a few questions. Naruto raised an eyebrow, but he didn't say anything. Standing beside him, Mavis laughed. Did this turn out better than she thought? Have we met before? No, we've never met in that person. So you're familiar with Minato Namikaze? Each of them turned their heads to look at Urza after this. He is my father. The immortal shinobi answered sincerely, making Urza's eyes widen in surprise. Really? You're his son? Naruto shrugged. I didn't know. You probably didn't. Naruto replied, what was he to you? He was my teacher, the one who taught me the magic of new joke, Urza replied, and the rest of Fairy Tail couldn't help but gasp. This was a story she had never shared with anyone. He also taught me everything I know and showed me the path of my magic. He was like a father to me. Well, this explains it. Naruto crossed his weapons over his chest. He might be a great guy to his student, but he's not a true father to his own child. He was particularly true, more so than a. You know that's not true. You want to argue with me? Naruto asked, glaring at her. He was an ass, I tell you. He was my teacher, someone I could call my father. Urza summoned her sword and pointed it at him. I won't tolerate you continuing to badmouth him like that. She growled, and Naruto rolled his eyes. Alright, please calm Urza down. Realizing the tense atmosphere between the two, Mira stepped in front of her best friend, placed her hand on his shoulders, and said, hoping to calm Urza, we'll leave your island immediately. Mira turned and laughed at Naruto. Please forgive us. She tried to push her away, but Urza refused to move and continued glaring at Naruto. When Fairy Tail Mag started to move, they were stopped, and it was Mavis who did this. Hold on. Mavis stepped forward and turned to face Naruto, holding her hands behind her rear. What? Naruto didn't like the laughter on Mavis's face. This promised trouble for him. Why don't you come with them? Forgive me. You're a member of Fairy Tail, right? Since when did he become a member of Fairy Tail? Why don't you try life as one of its members for once? Naruto was about to reply without taking a second to think of an answer, but Mavis hit him for following up. I promise you this is going to be a lot of fun. She then clapped her hands together and gave him those infamous big puppy dog eyes, something that, combined with her cuteness, was overkill even for someone like him. Please, Naruto, do it for me just this once. What do you say to Naruto? Would you like to come with us? Master Makarov asked with a smile. You're a member of Fairy Tail. What's more, you seem like a good friend of the first one. We would be more than happy to take you on as an official member. He completely ignored Makarov's words. Fine. Naruto finally said and snapped Mavis's fingers across the forehead, knocking her to her knees, but the spirit of Fairy Tail's first master laughed heartily nonetheless. Sayla's breakfast would most likely have to be eaten by his breeding stock because he couldn't think of any better option. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. X791, Magnolia. Marahin Strauss, the triumphant Fairy Tail, laughed heartily as she danced between the chairs and tables to serve cups of beer to the Fairy Tail members. Each one around the small guild hall drank, sang, and talked to one another, as if they were trying to make up for 7 years of lost time, nothing but tears and sorrow for the forgotten members of Fairy Tail. They were once the best guild in Earthland, but she didn't care all that much because the guild was still pretty much the same as before. After all, it was the Fairy Tail members that mattered. Nearly a decade had passed in real time, and yet Marahin was still the same 19-year-old she had been 7 years ago. She was still the beautiful young woman of below average height, with long, wavy gray hair that curled slightly at the ends and had 2 bangs framing her face and reaching down to her chest, then pulled back into a high ponytail by gathering and tying the hair that covered her forehead. She had large blue eyes and a curvy, voluptuous body with very large breasts. Mira wore a beautiful sleeveless ankle-length chestnut dress with a pleated skirt, with high heels that matched her dress, accessorized with a small chain necklace with an oval blue gem attached to it and a bracelet made of white flowers encircling her right wrist. In general, she hadn't aged a single day, and the same could be said for the other fairies on Tenru Island when Acnologia attacked them. The fairy sphere was truly an amazing spelling, Mira had to admit, because not only did it protect her and each of them from Acnologia, but it also protected them from time itself, preserving them in a static state many years before their disappearance. She was grateful for what the first master had done to protect them, and 7 years of life was only a poor price to pay for such a miracle. Here's your order, Urza. Mira laughed heartily as she handed the red-haired Nidus, who had changed out of her usual armor and was now wearing a high-collared, long-sleeved blouse and blue skirt, a medium slice of strawberry cheesecake on a plate with a silver fork, which she happily accepted and began to serve herself. Is this okay? The waitress asked in the amusement when she saw the happy laughter and heard the satisfied groan from her best friend. It's delicious. Urza nodded her head with a laugh, beaming at Mira. Thank you so much, Mira. Please don't mention it. She then glanced away at a table in the corner of the tavern for a moment before turning back to Urza. Tan, what's his type? My type? Who? Urza asked in confusion before looking in the direction Mira had been looking a moment ago. You mean that? For your information, Mira, he's not my type, and to answer your question, he hasn't done anything suspicious yet. The Fairy Queen scolded. Clearly, her opinions of him hadn't changed one bit, mainly because he hadn't done anything to change that. Literally, nothing. From that moment on, Naruto Uzumaki, who sat with his feet up on the table and leaned back on the legs of his chair, took a step into the Fairy Tail building if they could call the tavern, their guild hall. He had created his own space, completely separate from the others. He found a table in a corner of the space, said nothing, and silently enjoyed the drink Mira gave him. Sometimes, Mira heard him make comments whenever a fight broke out among the male members of the guild, but other than that, he remained completely silent. So, is he really her teacher's son? This came out as a question. Mira had never met Urza's teacher before, and because of their rivalry when they were younger, Urza had never shared her life outside the guild with her, but she first learned about him by eavesdropping on one of the conversations about him between Urza and the master a few years ago. Yes, he is. I mean, he looks just like his father. Urza rolled her eyes and then continued unpleasantly, but he's nothing like Minato-sensei. He's never mentioned his son before. Urza shook her head in response. Then she held the empty tray to her chest and asked with a laugh, "You really do have a lot of respect for your teacher, don't you, Urza?" "Respect? Look, I love him like a father," Urza replied, laughing warmly at the thought of her teacher. "I grew up respecting Minato-sensei. He was the one who taught me how to fight, how to survive, how to take care of myself, and much more than just my magic. I wouldn't be half the person I am today without him." Mira gasped slightly in surprise as Urza crossed her weapons over her chest and looked at Naruto again. She hadn't expected that she would have the honor of calling someone sensei my father, something she didn't know if she would ever have. "He's really amazing, isn't he?" "Yes, he is." Urza laughed before looking at Naruto, quietly growling in annoyance. "He's Minato-sensei's biological son and yet." "Come on, Urza. Give him a chance, won't you?" Mira laughed. "They barely know each other. Something must have happened between the two of them to make him dislike his father like that, don't you think?" Urza nodded, but she didn't say anything. She had thought about this. She couldn't bear it if someone badmouthed him, especially when that someone was his own son. Minato Namikaze was a man who had become a father figure to her around the time she was trying to master her magic and was still haunted by the horrible days at the Tower of Heaven. He was a great man, an amazing teacher, and an even greater father. She refused to believe that Naruto hated his dad for no reason. Something, which in her opinion must be a misunderstanding, must have resulted in him having such a negative opinion of his teacher, and she intended to find out what it was. However, looking at him right now, she wasn't sure if she could approach Naruto and talk about Minato Namikaze without starting a fight with him. They had a rough start, so it would be best for both of them if she kept her distance for the time being. Unbeknownst to both girls, Naruto listened to their conversation and paid extra attention to Urza's opinions about her teacher. "He's a member of Fairy Tail." Mira continued as she removed her hands from her chest and placed them on her hips. "Master Mavis has accepted him into our guild. He's one of us, so you shouldn't be too difficult about him." She then added before Urza could say anything, "Although, you have to admit he's hot." When she heard that, the scarlet-haired mage nearly choked on the soft piece of cake she was eating, saying it was almost impossible to say hotter than the guys we have here. "Don't you have a job to do?" "That's a shame, I was just joking around." Mira laughed foolishly before the request. "Oh, one more thing, what happened to your teacher?" "Well, he went on a trip to other countries after my education was finished," Urza replied with a sigh. "I haven't heard anything about him since." "I'm sure you'll find him again one day, Urza," Mira said as she placed her hand on her friend's shoulder and squeezed it comfortingly. "Yes, I really hope so." She laughed because she too had high hopes that they would meet again someday. Perhaps Naruto would know where he was, then she would have to ask him about it later. The game continued for more than 12 minutes before the door of the small tavern was pushed open and 5 very familiar faces walked in with a laugh over their faces. "Welcome back, everyone." Jera's Blendy waved cheerfully to them. She was a beautiful young woman with blue eyes, pink hair, large breasts, and a curvaceous figure. She wore a black waistcoat and matching skirt. The waistcoat had a collar and bow that reached only to her mid-chest, leaving her navel, belly, and the lower inner portion of her breasts completely exposed. She also wore a dark ribbon with dots that resembled cat ears and long black gloves that reached her arms. "It seems this has turned into a noisy guild again," said Lion Bastia, accompanied by Jiranikis, Yuka Suzuki, and Tobi Horhorta. Lion was a slender young man of average height with a muscular and toned physique. He had bluish-silver hair, most of which consisted of spiky strands sticking up the top of his head, except for a few that were tucked down and partially covered the upper left side of his face. "You guys." The sight of his rival and his teammates, Grey Fullbuster stood up from his seat and exclaimed in surprise. "Lamia Scale." Lucy gasped after the example of the grey color. Lamia the Scale was one of Fairy Tail's allies during their mission to destroy one of the strongest dark guilds in the Balam Alliance, Oration says. When searching for Tenru Island, Blue Pegasus and Lamia really helped each other out, one of the guild members informed them, forcing Grey to chuckle, while Lion simply smiled contentedly. "Well, this looks like we're in their debt now. Don't worry about it, the Blue Pegasus was the one who did it there first, but we have much more power," Lion smiled confidently. "Who cares about this?" The grey sweat dripped, saying inhumanely. "Well, in these past 7 years, we, the Lamia Scale, have risen to the number 2 guild in Fiori." The Sherry said with a laugh, placing his hand on the aforementioned of his important chest. "It's too bad for you, St. Lucy." "So does that mean number 1 is Blue Pegasus?" Lucy asked curiously. Absolutely not. Toby shouted dramatically. There's no way through. Settle down, Yuka tried to reassure her friend before turning back to Lucy. No, this isn't the Blue Pegasus. Well, enough about this, everyone. Jura chuckled as he placed his hands in the sleeves of his dark-colored Haori. The important thing is that everyone is alright. His eyes then caught sight of the young man sitting completely alone in a corner of the guild hall. Since Fairy Tail was in the middle of a match, such a sight was quite unusual. The blonde was also an unfamiliar face, so he couldn't help but ask, and who is that young man over there? We've never encountered him before, have we? Who I am is none of your business, Naruto said lazily as he folded his hands behind his head and leaned back even further. The chair looked like it was about to tip over at any second, but for some reason, Naruto was still keeping it balanced on the ground without any problem. What's your problem? Jairus couldn't help but ask, placing his hands on his hips. He's just shy, that's all, Mira said with a small laugh. Naruto decided to take her advice and went back to finish his drink. Anyway, realizing that Naruto wasn't going to say anything in response, Lion returned to his gray hair. That being said, I think it's time for us to take our leave. The Fairy Tail Ice Mage nodded and offered his hand to his rival, who immediately took it in a firm handshake. I'm glad you guys are finally back because things weren't as interesting as they used to be without Fairy Tail around. The fairy tale of good luck, Jura laughed, because you're going to need it to climb back to your position and regain your reputation. And you guys better watch out because we're behind now. Natsu declared and punched his right palm with a burning fist, smiling openly with confidence. Nodding his head, Lion turned and left the guild. His teammates quickly followed after him, with Jairus being the one who stayed behind for a few seconds longer to say goodbye to Lucy. The blonde happily accepted it before waiting for the dull mage to give a warm goodbye. The game continued, and Naruto was thinking of leaving to go home to Sayla when he suddenly noticed a pink-haired mop appear from under the other end of the table, accompanied by the head of a certain blue cat. Raising an eyebrow, Naruto put his feet down and leaned forward to look at them. What are you two doing? Naruto asked as Natsu, who had his scarf wrapped around his forehead and probably the lower half of his face, looked up at him from his position. We were wondering if you're a ninja, Natsu asked curiously. Always. Fellas spoke his trademark slogan and nodded his head in agreement. What makes you think I'm a ninja? Naruto asked. You make your hands like this when you use your magic. The Fire Dragon Slayer brings his hand together in the most common hand seal known to people outside the shinobi world, the Ram seal. This is a ninja's signature, right? Where did you even get that idea? Do you even know the difference between a ninja and a mage? Immortal Shinobi rolled his eyes. Natsu raised his hand and pointed to a certain young woman in the small building, but before he could answer his question, Naruto continued, you forget. I don't want to know the answer. It's probably something stupid anyway. He muttered under his breath and of course, with his heightened hearing, Natsu heard him. You use magic oratory, what kind of magic do you use, Naruto? Lucy decided to ask when she realized Natsu was about to explode right in her face. Can you manipulate time or something? What Naruto did was something she'd never seen before, but she read about it in some magic books. This was an extremely advanced magic that allowed the user to manipulate time. Storm magic was its name, if she remembered correctly. Unfortunate, but it's for me to know, Naruto replied by accident. Since you're the son of Urza's magic teacher, do you know the new joke magic too? The guild immediately fell into a deathly silence, and Natsu immediately realized it was incredibly stupid of him to ask that question. They could only nervously glance between Urza and Naruto, who, for the first time that day, had finally looked each other in the eye. Good. Urza broke the silence, crossing her weapons over her chest. Does it? It's for but before he could finish his answer, which was the same one he gave Lucy, Naruto felt his inner alarm blare and immediately brought out his sword to summon a weapon in defense. He heard the clang of metal on metal as he felt a counterforce against his blade, but showed no surprise when he saw Urza standing in front of him with a sword in her hand. Impatient, aren't you? Naruto asked, and Urza smiled contentedly at the reply, while other members of Fairy Tail looked on in surprise. They had never seen anyone who had the ability to pick up on a new joke as quickly as Urza and managed to block his strike without any trouble. It's because you're not going to answer her question. She explained before looking at Naruto's sword, a katana. You're very quick, aren't you? She expected nothing less from her teacher's son, who was the only person who could use the new joke faster than she could. I thought that brat over there was the one who wanted to pick a fight with me. Naruto gestured toward Natsu, who yelled in frustration at having been called a brat again, but was restrained by Lucy and the gray-haired boy. You want to fight me too? He asked. The burning determination in his eyes, something he was so familiar with, had already answered his question. I'd like to see exactly how strong you are, Urza said. I want to test my strength against Minato-sensei's son. Naruto immediately stuck his tongue out in displeasure. What? Are you afraid of getting your ass kicked by your student? She said insultingly, but Naruto wasn't bothered by it one bit. Instead, he decided to say. I know what you're trying to do, Scarlet Urza. His statement made Urza's eyes widen slightly in surprise. Are you trying to prove you're better? That you have more right to call yourself my father's child than I do? Seeing the worried expression on Urza's face, Naruto smiled smugly. Fine, you can run around calling him dad all you want, but don't tell me to do the same. He's never been a real father to me anyway. He said, drawing his sword back and making it disappear. From the very beginning, everything that happened was because of him. He was a failure as a man and an even bigger failure as a father. He failed to save the love of his life. He failed to protect his own child from a horrible childhood, and little did they know that Naruto simply didn't speak ill of his father. What happened between you and him? Urza asked slowly. Her expression softened slightly as she stood up and sheathed her sword. She was halfway to his right. Damn, that happened, miss. Naruto said as he leaned back and put his feet up on the table, folding his hands behind his head. Damn, it turns out Urza could only wonder what he meant by that. Would you like another drink? Mira asked cheerfully as she appeared on his side, placing a cup of beer in her hand. You can put it on my table, Naruto said shortly after, not taking his eyes off the book he was reading. On the table to his left was a pile of books, something he'd seen him with since his conversation with Urza ended. With a laugh on her face, Mira substituted Naruto's empty cup for the one she was holding. Thanks. He nodded and picked up the cup to take a sip. He couldn't get drunk no matter how much he drank, but a good beer was still something he greatly enjoyed. Fairy Tail might look like a dump, but they had good drinks, something he was grateful for. What are you reading, Naruto? Mira asked with interest, trying to get a glimpse of the inside of the book. Don't you think you should introduce yourself first before attempting to start a conversation? I don't even know your name yet. His words made her blush with embarrassment. Now that she thought about it, she rightly hadn't introduced herself yet. I'm so sorry. Where's my way? Returning her usual sweet laugh to her face and doing her best to restore it to its normal healthy color, Mira introduced herself, placing her hand on her chest. My name is Mirahin Strauss, but you can call. But before she could finish her introduction, Naruto interrupted, don't worry, I know who you are. From the stack of books, Naruto pulled out an old weekly issue of Sorcerer's magazine and showed it to her. The gorgeous model featured on the front page was none other than Mira, dressed in a white bikini top, a very short skirt, and nothing else. Ah. Looking at the picture of her in the team reveal, Mira could only nod her head in understanding. However, she immediately frowned when she looked at him. You were teasing me, weren't you? Just because I have dad's publication doesn't mean I don't have a sense of humor. Naruto replied with a shrug. So you like what you see on this page? Mira asked as she picked up the magazine and held it to her chest, giving the same seductive laugh she did in the photoshoot years ago. Naruto stared at her and at the Sorcerer's magazine for a moment before replying, this would be a lie if I didn't. Well then, I'm glad you're not an emo bro. Mira giggled foolishly at the thought, while Naruto could only chuckle silently at her statement. What makes him think this? He had been many things. A troublemaker, a noisy ramen-loving brat in orange clothes, a good friend, a hero, a strong leader, a father, but an emo bro wasn't definitely one of them. Pretending to be something he wasn't was also one of his big projects for the future. I have my imagination. Mira playfully tapped his head, rolling his eyes. Naruto suddenly had the feeling that his imagination wasn't something he should underestimate. Okay, let me tell you, I'm not an emo at all. I just don't feel like talking. I'm surprised but I believe him. Mira laughed foolishly. Hey, are you married? The familiar voice caught Naruto and Mira's attention, and when they turned their heads in that direction, they saw Urza staring at Alzak and Biska, her eyes widening like dinner plates. Blushing rather childishly, she too appeared to be caught off guard. Yes, for about 6 years now, Alzak replied. Urza-sen is right. And you know what? I was the one who suggested it. Biska said with a laugh, nudging her husband with her elbow. He was so nervous and… Can we just skip that part? Alzak laughed silently in embarrassment. See, congratulations. Urza stammered, bending down. I might be a little inexperienced and naive, but please take care of me. She nervously followed Alzak. If you, Mira giggled foolishly as she looked at her best friend. Wasn't it actually strange for her to see Urza, who always had a strong and confident aura around her, acting so feminine? Then she was the only one who wasn't surprised by the knight's odd behavior. She's somehow twisted all that around to be herself, hasn't she? Well, she'd better not think about it. Naruto grumbled, it's better for young people not to think about love at this age, since there's so much more to the world around them. Her eyes widened slightly as he realized what he had just said, but it was too late because Mira had heard him. This is profound, you know. He asked humorously, and here I thought you hadn't thought about most of the people around you. I guess I was dead wrong about you, wasn't I? Don't you have a job to do? And now you sound exactly like Urza. 20 years older and I'd definitely mistake you for a wise old man, or Urza would mistake you for her teacher. Naruto continued staring at her, his face remaining emotionless. However, even after this, a chuckle didn't completely disappear from his face. Ah, relax, I'm just kidding. You enjoy yourself, don't you? Naruto asked as he looked back at the book he was reading. However, before Mira could make any comment about it, a certain pink-haired dragon assassin charged at Naruto with a huge grin on his face and charged first, intent on punching the immortal shinobi right through the face. Naruto Uzumaki, however, could see Natsu's attempt to attack him coming from a mile away. By moving his head out of the way, Naruto dodged Natsu's punch at the last second, causing the pink-haired dragon assassin's fist to slam into the table instead. Hey! Don't run around attacking people like that. Most of the fairy tale members shouted out dramatically, pointing their hands at Natsu. Surprise. Naruto grumbled mockingly as he bent down to pick up his books. True to his personality, Naruto was actually a little surprised that it took Natsu so long to put his mind to it and challenge him. Here you go, Mira said as she handed Naruto some books she had picked up from the floor. Thank you. Naruto nodded before they disappeared in a flash of light. Natsu? Urza said sternly, rising from her seat. What do you think you're doing? I challenge him, what else? Natsu stood up, piercing his palm with the fire that blazed around his body, smiling openly with confidence before pointing his finger at Naruto. I challenge you to a fight, Naruto. Why should I fight him? Naruto asked, folding his weapons across his chest. You're strong, and I want to become stronger. Natsu smiled broadly. You use the same magic as Urza, so if I defeat you, I'll be stronger than her. What ridiculous logic. Naruto grumbled. Do you even have a brain in that head of yours? It was still hard for him to believe that Natsu was actually Zeref's brother. Was he literally all brawling and no brains? Does anyone want to stop him? Naruto asked, looking around the guild. Well, Natsu will always be Natsu, Makarov said. He looked drunk. He won't stop the implantation of hidden microphones in you unless you give him exactly what he wants. Gildert continued with a small smile. You should fight him. Urza spoke as she crossed her weapons over her chest, tilting her head to the side. He just wants to fight you, so it's better to give it to him sooner rather than later. Fine then, it's not like I have anything better to do. I'll fight you, Natsu. Naruto accepted the challenge. Natsu cheered loudly. However, he then reached into his pockets and pulled out 5 wallets very familiar to the members of Team Natsu. If I win, I'll take all your money, including your team's money as well. Those who were drinking immediately spat their beer out when Natsu, Lucy, Urza, the Grey One, and Wendy checked their pockets and found them empty. When did you steal it? They all shouted and pointed their hands at Naruto. Even Urza's wallet, which she kept in her pocket dimension, was stolen, much to her shock and astonishment. I'll cook your cats too. Ignoring her question, Naruto continued with a smug smile, much to everyone's shock again, he raised his other hand, which held Fellas, Carla, and Lirio by their tails. Carla. Happy. Lily. The entire guild burst into laughter. I'm serious. His tone immediately extinguished the laughter, and everyone stared at him in shock. Hey. Don't pull a prank like that. Natsu yelled and tried to grab his wallet, as did Fellas, who was very uncomfortable with Carla and Lirio. Give me back Fellas and my money. Naruto then released the cat, but he still held the wallets in his hands. Do you still want to fight me? Naruto asked as he put the wallets away with his magic. You'd better choose wisely because I'm not giving them back when this is over. Fine. Go do this. Natsu declared, pointing his hand at Naruto. You're over. Hold on. Lucy stood up from her seat and looked at Natsu. This is all my money. What if you lose? Wendy, who was sitting next to her, nervously nodded her head. That's right, don't forget you've never even hit Urza before. Gray indicated. From what they could see, Naruto was strong. Perhaps as powerful as Urza because of his newfound speed and ability to block her strike with ease. Being the son of their teacher, there were no storytelling tricks he'd invited up his sleeve, and fighting an opponent whose magic and fighting styles were completely unknown to you wasn't something anyone could fully prepare for beforehand. They're right, Natsu. Urza stepped forward, declaring firmly, it's not like I doubt your strength, but what if you lose? Are we going to lose all our money? She had never doubted Natsu and his power, as she always thought he was stronger than her. She had to admit that she secretly wanted to see Naruto's strength, but she was more concerned about their money. She didn't care about Natsu in the slightest, because Naruto had the element of surprise on his side and might just decide the outcome of the battle. Don't worry. I'm going to kick this guy's ass. Natsu smiled smugly, cracking his knuckle, but even with so much determination, Lucy wasn't convinced. Fine. Like about this. Naruto said, making a thoughtful expression. He loses, I'll take his money, but you guys can find a way to screw him over later. How? Lucy asked nervously. This is for you to understand. Naruto finished with a small grin. So? You still want to fight? Natsu nodded, smiling broadly. Well, you want to stop it. He looked around. The members of Team Natsu remained silent. Although Lucy seemed to want to argue, while Wendy was too nervous and shy to say anything, in the end, the girls didn't say much like the gray-haired one. A few minutes later, everyone was waiting, eager for a good show to unfold. Some chatted about random things while others placed bets on the winner, and of course, Kana was taking bets from all over the world. Naruto and Natsu's fighting ground was a large open area of grass and dirt in the middle of the lush forest near the city of Magnolia. The fairy tale mages were gathered around the southern edge of the area. Phew. Natsu ignited flames around his body in anticipation. Come on, let's get this fight started already. He yelled, with Naruto standing in front of him. Put your shorts away. Kana shouted at Natsu, a barrel of beer standing by her side as she gathered bets from other guild members. I still got people placing their bets. Everyone was betting on Naruto to win. Only his teammates were praying that Natsu would come out on top so they could get their money back. I want to fight him now. Natsu then pointed his finger at Naruto, who held a rather relaxed stance for someone about fighting, shifting his weight to one leg and placing a hand on his hip. Impatient, aren't you? Naruto said, making a thoughtful expression. You know what? I think I'll add one more rule to our fight. If you manage to land even the slightest blow on me, you'll win. No one gasped in surprise, no one except Urza. What? Do you despise me? Natsu shouted. Nope, I'm being very serious here. Naruto replied, resisting his hand. He's coming at me with the intent to kill, the brat, I mean. You could be killed instead. Urza finished and saw that everyone was looking at her. Minato-sensei said the same thing. Everyone paled, wondering why she was so much more powerful than them. What kind of horrifying education had Urza undergone at her teacher's hands? Meanwhile, Naruto couldn't stop smiling. She remembered. Alright then Natsu ignited his fist with fire and sprinted at Naruto. Kiryu no, but even before he could make a punch, the fire dragon slayer suddenly felt his eyes swirling black and red without his initiative. The next instant, Natsu realized he was facing away from Naruto, his right arm tucked behind his head. He tried to move, but stood still, his blood running cold as he suddenly felt something pointy behind his neck. I haven't even started yet, Naruto blurted out, holding Natsu by the wrist, a knife poked behind his head. Much like Natsu, those watching from outside were terrified by his speed. Urza swallowed nervously. He was much faster than his teacher. Naruto was fast, even though he didn't seem like he was trying. This meant that he could move even faster than this. Remember, I'm not your friend. I'm not part of your family. Right now, I'm your enemy. Naruto stoically recounted, steel your nerves, gather that resolve, picture me as someone who tries to hurt the people you care about. He released Natsu, and the boy took a few steps forward before turning to face Naruto, who laughed when he saw the determination in Natsu's eyes. If you're ready, then go begin. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. At night, when Naruto stepped into the two-story house on the Fiori coast and made his way to the living room without making the slightest sound, like a true shinobi when he moved into enemy territory, he was greeted by a sight that amused and annoyed him at the same time. The man, who was none other than his shadow reproduction, sat on the lounge chair in the middle of the room, sporting a blissful laugh on his face as he leaned back and rested the back of his head against the headrest of his chair. Now, even though only his head was visible, as the rest of his body was hidden behind the comfortable lounge chair's backrest, Naruto knew perfectly well that his reproduction was naked from the waist down, and his impressive manhood was hard as a rock and adorned for full attention. Even better, there was a woman kneeling on the floor between his outstretched legs, as if this were her proper place, and using her mouth to pleasure him like the good and naughty little servant that she was. From a moment of doing nothing, allowing his reproduction to enjoy the pleasant and awe-inspiring service of his or her beautiful demonic servant for a few more seconds, Naruto decided to speak until both were aware of his presence. You two are very lucky that I'm in a good mood. Almost instantly, both jumped. The reproduction Naruto turned and stared at the original in surprise, while Sayla, who was naked except for her knee-length socks, hurriedly stood up and looked at her master, her true master, nervously. The boss, you're in the back. The reproduction greeted cheerfully, but in truth, he was quite nervous. The boss was walking around the house and he didn't know anything about it, the boss himself, Naruto was just that good. How long Naruto had been watching him with Sayla, he had no idea. Master, welcome back. She bent her head deeply, completely unaware that her action caused her large breasts to jiggle. Having sex with her offspring, which was basically him, wasn't counted as doing so with someone else behind his back, right? This wasn't the first time she'd done it with her offspring, or even more than a handful of them, but this was actually the first time her master, the original Naruto Uzumaki, knew nothing about it. For starters, having Hex with her wasn't the offspring's mission, as he was sent home to have breakfast with her and guard her company while he was gone for the day. How was it? Clean your mouth first, Sayla. The Aetherius blushed and hurriedly used the handkerchief his master gave him to wipe the drool and saliva from the corners of his lips and his chin. She had basically made a mess all over his face by sucking him in the most pleasing way possible. And you, Naruto turned to his reproduction, dissipate before I do. The reproduction giggled nervously and did as he was told. Everything the reproduction had experienced immediately rushed into his head. This was a fairly quiet day for Sayla and her reproduction, but nevertheless, it was much more interesting than his morning with the fairy tale. Sayla's breakfast was absolutely awful and downright disgusting, but the reproduction managed to force a laugh through each course to make her happy, something he understood Sayla was genuinely grateful for. They spent the entire morning training, keeping each other in top shape before Naruto took Sayla out for lunch, and he enjoyed the rest of the day peacefully and quietly on the beach with her. It began when dinner was finally over. They started with a passionate kiss, which heated up after a few seconds, before moving on to something more physical. Sayla couldn't resist, not that she tried, when he removed her clothes and began feasting on her breasts before working his way around the rest of her body. He took his time, savoring the pleasure in the moans that escaped his mouth. His hands reached for her breasts as his face buried itself between her thighs, wetting her chin, her nose, and filling her mouth with her juices as his tongue moved inside her. To make a long story short, this was going to be a hell of a night, and the replay was definitely enjoying it. Until the original Naruto showed up and ruined all the fun with his presence. Well, enjoying you a little too much, aren't you? Naruto asked and continued before Sayla could say anything. Relax, Sayla, I'm just joking. I'm not crazy about you or anything. This isn't really your first time with one of my reproductions, is it? But you didn't know, Sayla said, lowering her head in shame. This is fine. The reproductions are copies of me, so in a way, this just shows me how much I want to get my hands all over you and inside you. Sayla blushed, but she laughed nonetheless. Hex wasn't something she was shy about, and her master knew this very well. Come here, just because my reproduction has already spent some high-quality time with you doesn't mean I have to. The Aetherius happily let herself fall onto her arms and pressed her naked body against his, allowing her master to wrap his arms around her and place his hands on her back before pressing his lips against hers. How was your day, master? The playback had filled her with the basics, so she knew where he'd gone. Was it boring? You must be bored out of your mind. Her hand moved away from his hip and traveled down to his pants, where she didn't hesitate to put them on. Would you like to entertain me? She asked, trying her best to be seductive. However, in her opinion, Naruto thought she didn't have to because her voice and the way she usually addressed him were seductive enough. Daring, isn't it? Naruto said as he gazed off into the distance with a thoughtful expression. To tell you the truth, it wasn't exactly boring. Things got rather interesting this afternoon. How so? Sayla asked curiously. She heard everything he said, but she wasn't bothered by fairy tale all that much. Moreover, her master didn't object when she removed his pants, so she continued. Would you like to know? Naruto asked, moaning slightly as Sayla took him into her mouth. You know that. I think you should know. Aetherius Beautiful widened his eyes, but his mouth was too busy to give an answer. He took a seat on the lounge where his reproduction had sat a few minutes ago, giving him a more comfortable position to tell the story and enjoy the hospitality Sayla could offer. He had to admit that he was connected by the memories of his replay. Before that day. Remember, I'm not your friend. I'm not part of your family. Right now, I'm your enemy. Naruto stoically recounted, steal your nerves, gather that resolve, picture me as someone who tries to hurt the people you care about. He released Natsu, and the boy took a few steps forward before turning to face Naruto, who laughed when he saw the surprise, but still burning determination in Natsu's eyes. If you're ready, then go begin. Alright, I'm powered up. Natsu grinned broadly, before charging forward. When he was close enough, the Dragon Slayer sent a barrage of punches toward Naruto's head, only for the blonde to dodge out of the way by shifting his body sideways, moving at an even greater speed than Natsu's punching speed. Calmly, Naruto's hand suddenly shot out and grabbed Natsu's wrist, stopping him from attacking his right arm. Almost instantly, Natsu tried to punch Naruto with his left fist, only for the blonde to block with the back of his other hand. Faster than his eyes could follow, the immortal shinobi grabbed his hand from behind and punched Natsu twice, sucking in his midsection. The punches made Natsu cough in agony before he was met with a square of punch to the jaw, sending him flying backward as Naruto released his wrist. Those drills were incredibly powerful, and even with a stamina greater than a normal mage, Natsu could feel it very clearly. They inflicted extreme pain on him and had enough force to send him flying several meters. He rolled the dirt. His face hit the grime once before he forced himself to his feet. However, the moment he did so, Naruto was right to say, his right leg was positioned for a kick that would most likely land on his face, and given how powerful the drills were, Natsu would parry them. Kiryu no. As quickly as he could, Natsu gathered the fire in his mouth before releasing it in a torrent of flame, directing it at Naruto who was above the collision in midair. Hoko. The fire completely engulfed his body, but when Natsu's roaring attack came to an end a second later, with smoke pouring from his mouth, the owner of Tenryjima was nowhere to be found. To those watching from a distance, it appeared as if Naruto could move so fast they thought he teleported. Before the fire blast could hit him, Naruto vanished into a blur and almost instantly reappeared directly behind Natsu. When Natsu realized Naruto was behind him and turned his head, Naruto suddenly disappeared from sight again and then, much to the shock of the viewer, appeared right in front of him, where he had been just a second before. Natsu only had time to turn his head halfway because Naruto wasted no time in sending a punch to his right cheek, sending him flying again. "You make this too easy for me, you know," Naruto said over Natsu as he managed to pick himself up again. There was a tender bruise on his cheek, but overall, it wasn't anything serious. "They're getting serious. Don't worry, it was just a warm-up," Natsu declared confidently, releasing the fire from his hands. Something like that wasn't going to bring him down. "Try to dodge this. No Kiryu," he yelled, charging at Naruto, who calmly watched the pink-haired youth's movement, still completely unfazed. Tekken. Natsu punched through with all his might, causing the area in front of him to explode in a wave of dragon fire that once again engulfed Naruto. "Did he get it?" Lucy asked. However, she was confused because she didn't understand why Naruto didn't dodge Natsu's attack when he was more than fast enough to do so. Then, before anyone could answer their question, the smoke was cleared by a strong gust of wind and Fairy Tail's eyes widened in shock when they saw Naruto standing in the same spot, holding Natsu's burning fist as if it were nothing, completely unharmed by Natsu's devastating attack. Even Natsu, whose fist had been immediately stopped, couldn't believe what he was seeing because until now, only Gilderd, the strongest Fairy Tail member, had shown the ability to block his punch without moving an inch of his body like that. "Is this it?" Naruto asked, staring at Natsu's hand with a bored expression, but in his mind, he was thinking very seriously, this is his magic. No wonder Zera said he struggles to feel anything. The immortal shinobi tightened his grip around Natsu's knuckle, making him wince in pain. "What are you doing? Didn't I tell you to come at me with the intent to kill? Get serious." He thrust his arm forward, forcing Natsu onto his knee, or he's lost. With the same grip on Natsu, Naruto spun his body around and shook the boy across the field. "TCH." Grunting in annoyance, Natsu was able to regain his balance over the mid-air collision and land on his feet this time. Using brute force to push forward, the pink-haired youth covered the distance as fast as he could, unleashing a large stream of fire from each of his hands. "Take this." Natsu yelled and slashed his hand vertically at Naruto, but the blonde simply raised his hands and stopped each burning fist with enough force to push Natsu back. When the Dragon Slayer tried to kick him, Naruto stepped forward and blocked with his left hand before slamming his fist into the top of his head, knocking Natsu to the ground face first. When he looked up, Natsu's expression turned serious. He raised both legs and spun around, igniting his feet with the flame, only for Naruto to raise his right leg and block Natsu's kick with his shin. Kiryu no. However, this time, he was totally prepared. With a massive amount of fire already gathered in his mouth and lungs, the moment his foot made contact with Naruto's leg, Natsu opened his mouth and roared like a dragon, while still holding his body upside down, igniting a wave of fire that was even larger than his first roar attack on Naruto. Hoko. The range of his attack was even greater than before, carving a path of destruction across the land, as well as a portion of the forest in front of him, setting the trees and plants ablaze. "What do you think?" Natsu smiled with satisfaction as he stood up and finished the attack, expecting to find a badly burned Naruto lying on the ground in front of him. However, he was taken aback when suddenly a hand shot out of the ground and grabbed his ankle, immobilizing him. The next instant, the ground cracked open and Naruto burst from the earth, sending an uppercut to the stunned Dragon Slayer's jaw. Natsu gritted his teeth and a pair of rear-end feet sailed out as the punch slammed into his face before he landed on his back with a grunt. The old trick never gets old. Naruto grumbled as he brushed the dust off himself. "Is that it?" he asked, looking at Natsu, who was staring at him in disbelief. There wasn't a single burn mark on his body and his clothes looked fine too. There was no way he could have reacted to an attack as quickly as that. "That was nice, but it's not nice enough to catch me off guard," Naruto remarked, folding his weapons across his chest. "He's playing with him." Lucy screamed in the crash, holding her head with both hands. "He's not using his magic yet," the gray one grumbled, sweating slightly. "Those attacks were pure physical force." "Are you kidding me?" The motor, the mage with the high-speed magic, couldn't believe it. He doesn't use magic and he already moves this thing fast, what the hell. And he could really hit hard, too. Mira nodded, watching the damage from Naruto's uppercut landed on the Dragon Slayer's face. Urza, meanwhile, was strangely silent. She had been watching Naruto the whole time, thinking he would fight like his father, but much to her expectation, he didn't. He had a fighting style of his own, a style that was unpredictable and on a whole new level. With such speed and strength, Urza believed that Naruto could end the fight at any moment he wanted to. "You're a tough bastard, aren't you?" Natsu asked as he wiped the blood from his chin, keeping his eyes on Naruto the whole time, as if he believed the blonde would disappear and then randomly appear somewhere around him to deliver another devastating punch or kick. Naruto took a stance, one hand behind his back and the other extended forward. "The little dragon has come," he said, taunting Natsu by making the come upon gesture with his hand. "Show me your strength." "You asked for it." Natsu gritted his teeth as he unleashed his magic, engulfing his body in a column of fire. Ryu mode, lightning fire dragon mode, much to his surprise, lightning began to appear around him and soon surrounded his body. The ground around him was either destroyed or burned as his magic power surged like a rocket. "Wow." Wendy gasped at the clash as the two elements strongly demonstrated their presence. Is this Lucy was also surprised. Taking a leap into the air, Natsu generated a large amount of fire in his right hand and lightning in his left hand, which he then combined before unleashing the massive combination of his magic on Naruto, creating a very large and bright explosion around him, wreaking havoc on the ground and sending mag flying a little. The entire area trembled from the blast. Natsu gasped as he stared at the dome of fire and lightning. It was nowhere near as strong as before and it took a lot from him, but at least he didn't pass out after using it. He just hoped it would be enough to get Naruto. This it did, but at the same time, this it did not do. This continued for a second before the explosion was carried away by a huge gust of wind that was created by the man who had been standing in the middle of it. Wind? Urza, being one of a few mag who were still standing, as the rest had already been knocked to the ground, spoke in surprise as she used both weapons to protect her face from the strong wind. "I'm not finished yet." Natsu roared as he descended upon all four of them. Combining fire and lightning once more, the dual-element Dragon Slayer gathered them within his mouth and then unleashed them toward Naruto, generating an enormous and destructive burst of sparks that wreaked havoc wherever it struck. Naruto, however, showed not the slightest nervousness or even surprise. Calmly but swiftly, he returned his hands before bringing them together in front of him, palms facing forward. Water formed around him and shot toward the blast of brilliant fire in the form of a gigantic circular torrent of water, even larger than Natsu's lightning fire dragon's roar. A large amount of steam was created above the collision between the two powerful techniques, but Naruto's water vortex quickly overwhelmed Natsu's roar attack. The Dragon Slayer's eyes widened in surprise as the water wave, which was infused with the lightning of his attack, extinguished the blaze and continued traveling in his direction. "Brink magic too." Juvia Lockster, a water mage herself, couldn't stop exclaiming in surprise. However, it was clear to her that Naruto's spelling was on a whole different level. Natsu wisely stepped aside because he knew that water and lightning simply didn't mix well and being struck by them simultaneously wasn't going to be pretty. He blamed Naruto, creating a sphere of lightning and flame around his fist. Naruto slammed his hand vertically above it, causing a massive chunk of rock to erupt from the ground, standing between him and Natsu. Fairy Tail Mag could only gasp and stare at Naruto in the collision. "Arr!" Natsu roared and punched through the rock with all his might, shattering it to pieces in the process. Naruto had anticipated this, so he quickly backed away before Natsu's fist could find his face, using steam to vanish from the Dragon Slayer's sight. "My turn now." Before Natsu could begin searching for Naruto, he shuddered in pain as a sharp pain shot through his stomach, caused by Naruto shoving his elbow into his lower abdomen. "This battle is over," Naruto said and thrust his hand into Natsu's chest from below, sending him flying. Naruto then vanished, and as Natsu stood amidst a mid-air collision, he was suddenly struck by something moving incredibly fast, causing him to scream in pain and plummet downward with extreme speed. However, before Natsu could even get 2 feet close to the ground, something suddenly hit him again, sending him flying through the air. The force of the impact was so great that it created a small, yet still perceptible shockwave. The attack continued, and Fairy Tail Mag watched in shock and amazement as Natsu seemed to be tossed, pierced, and turned around seemingly by the air himself. They knew perfectly well what or who was attacking their fire dragon killer, but no matter how hard they tried, their eyes couldn't catch up with its speed. It moved and attacked so fast that it was almost invisible. "What's next?" Lucy asked, her body jerking. I can't see anything at all." The next second, as Natsu floated through the air, Naruto appeared, nominating him and delivering a punch straight into Natsu's stomach, smashing him down to the ground with such force that it created a shockwave strong enough to knock some unprepared fairy tail members back. Naruto landed back on the ground a short while later, his feet bouncing off the earth for about a meter before he managed to stand. Turning around, he glanced at Natsu, whose vision had been plunged into darkness the moment he hit the ground, before turning his attention back to Makarov, who, along with the rest of Fairy Tail, could only stare at him in fear. "I guess," he began, slowly nodding his head. "This is your triumph. Only then, you know, I don't like cat meat for starters, so don't worry, I won't cook the cats," Naruto said as he summoned the wallets. "But I think I'll take this." He took the money from each of them before shaking them back to their owners. He counted out a few thousand jewels and gave them to Mira. "Keep it, it's for my food and tips for you." Mira didn't know how to respond, so she simply accepted his money with a nod. Naruto walked over to Urza, who was standing with her teammates, and patted her on the shoulder. "You'd better start thinking about it now." He reminded them of their promise before making his way back to the guild. "You defeat him." Sayla nodded, laughing triumphantly. "As expected of my master, not even Final can hope to match you." A few decades ago, Naruto had told Sayla about the true identity of Final, the strongest Aetherius demon. To say she was impressed to learn that the demon with the greatest power was her creator's brother was an understatement. While she had never met him before, Sayla had an immense amount of respect for Final for his power as the strongest. However, this still couldn't compare to the respect she had for her master, Naruto Uzumaki, the strongest being she had ever known in her lifetime, whose powers could shake the entire world to its foundation. Although she had never seen him going all out against someone or something, not that he needed to, because they had never found anything that managed to push him that far yet, she knew perfectly well that he had long since surpassed the pious level, and there was nothing in this world that could hope to defeat him. "I don't think he's a little stronger than you right now," Naruto said thoughtfully. "He has the guts, the will, and the potential to become even more powerful than he is now, but sometimes, those just aren't enough. So, he can't kill Zero-sama right now. Not without his Aetherius power, something I don't think he has any control over." Sayla nodded her head in understanding. The Final wasn't Aetherius to begin with, so he wouldn't have any control over his curse like the rest of them did. Moreover, as the strongest, his desire to kill Zeref would be a whole lot stronger than the others, meaning he was more likely to miss the moment the demon seed was awakened. "Please continue then, master." "Man, this sucks." Natsu Dragneel crossed his weapons over his chest and snorted in annoyance. He had bandages wrapped around his body from head to toe, but overall, he was fine. Wendy had already taken care of most of his injuries with her magic, but he still had a few bruises here and there and some broken ribs, which would take some time to heal properly. "Closed." Lucy shouted, pointing her finger at Natsu. "This is your fault. Our money was taken so carelessly." "Hey. Wasn't it Naruto who stole it? Then don't ever challenge him again." Then she grabbed her head with both hands and it fell onto the table. "How am I supposed to pay my rent this month?" Ignoring Lucy, Natsu turned to Naruto and asked him, "Hey. Naruto, how did you become so powerful?" "I trained hard to get stronger." The blonde man replied simply, not bothering to take his eyes off the book he was reading. "Do you have any helpful advice for me?" "You figure it out." Giving Natsu a cold reply, Naruto then turned his head to the side when he saw Mira making her way to his table with a cup of tea in her hands. "Ah, here we go." He immediately perked up and laughed. "Thanks." "You're welcome, Naruto-kun." The waitress laughed and put down the cup. "So, this is Naruto-kun now?" Naruto teased. "Do you have a problem with this?" Mira asked sweetly as she stood up. "Call me whatever you want." Naruto shrank back, not offering any objection. Naruto. Can I help you?" He didn't have to look to know it was Lucy. He had already memorized her voice and magical signature in his head. "See, can you give me my change?" She stammered nervously. "This is all I have to do." She clasped both her hands together. "Please," she said hopefully. "No, I can't," Naruto replied curtly, shattering the Sky Mage's hopes into pieces. But Naruto then closed the book and placed it on the table before turning his head to look at Lucy. What? She was a little taken aback by the way Naruto was looking at her. Naruto began, "Are you constantly worried about your money? Like, since I came to this place, I've heard you whine about the rent a total of 52 times and..." "Wait, you counted yourself." Someone shouted in surprise, interrupting Naruto. "Do you have a problem with this?" The mage wisely looked away when he met Naruto's cold glare, while Lucy could only blush in embarrassment. Anyway, Naruto cleared his throat and then turned back to Lucy. Was his emphatic speech actually hard to notice because she kept doing this from time to time, even in the middle of the game? "It's just that I can't understand why a girl like you has to worry so much about money. Take Mira here for an example." He gestured his hand to Mira, making her point at it in surprise. She's pretty much in the same position you're right about now, and while I don't know if she's a tenant like you or not, what worries me is that she advertises free food and free drinks. Naruto-kun, it's actually because. Ignoring Mira, he continued, there are many ways for you to raise your income, so you don't have to worry about money. You can become a model or something with this kind of body. Have you ever tried modeling before? Yes, but. Guess what, you were modeling and those guys came along and ruined it. Naruto pointed his hand at Natsu and Gray, his teammates. No, I mean, yes, they really did do something like that, but my dream is to become a writer, not a model. Lucy laughed quietly and nervously, scratching the back of her head. A writer? Naruto raised an eyebrow in surprise before looking at Lucy with interest. Any books yet? He asked. Yes, but, you know. Naruto shook his head with a laugh, gesturing for her to stand up. She didn't have to say it because he already understood that her books weren't going to sell very well. Here. In a flash, a book appeared in his hand and he gave it to Lucy. I let you borrow this. What's this book? Lucy asked as she picked up the Naruto book and read the title, The Tale of the Completely Impetuous Shinobi. She turned and looked for the author's name. Jiraiya, the Toad Sage. She had read many books, but she had never heard of an author with such a strange pseudonym before. Muahaha. What a lame name. Natsu and his cat shouted in laughter. However, they immediately stopped and turned as pale as ghosts when a sword appeared in their field of vision and impaled itself on the wooden wall just a millimeter away from their faces. That book is very important to me, Naruto said. It wasn't a bestseller once, but to me, it was always the best kind of book. Naruto said with a laugh as Lucy opened the book to take a look. This is, she said in amazement. That right. I was named after the main character in that book. The immortal shinobi nodded, chuckling fondly at the memories of the past. It was poorly sold, no one bought it. He then returned to eat his bite. I hope this will allow you to have more faith and belief in yourself. Lucy nodded and the guild fell silent as they listened to Naruto's words. Guard your dream as a living writer and remember that all things are possible as long as you believe in them. Lucy then hugged him tightly to her chest before bowing. Thank you. She stood up, raising a bright laugh. Naruto then reached into his pocket and summoned several thousand jewels from his dimensional pocket, which he then gave to her, much to everyone's surprise. Congratulations, you've just earned your return. Lucy gasped in shock as she accepted the money. I'm giving you this so you have a copy of each and every one of your books, given that you still have them. I'll have them in a moment, please wait here. The blonde quickly lowered his head before leaving the guilds as fast as she could, making his way to the house to grab the Naruto books he'd bought with his money. The laughter on his face couldn't get any bigger or any brighter. Since the door was closed, the guild quickly returned to what they were doing, Naruto's words echoing in their minds. The shinobi, meanwhile, had gone back to drink his tea, but when he realized that Mira was watching him the whole time, he couldn't help but ask. Why are you looking at me like that? You're so nice and quite sweet too. Mira declared gently before placing another cup of tea in her hand, replacing Naruto's empty cup. Here you go. This one's on me this time. Fine, thanks. Naruto laughed and picked it up. The perk of being a good person. I still can't get used to it. He grumbled before taking a small sip. It was very delicious as everything Mira had been making for him. It didn't take long for another member of Team Natsu to arrive at their table. This time, it was a petite girl with fair skin and long dark blue hair that reached down to her waist, with two bangs framing her face and reaching down to her chest next to her black eyes. She wore a pleated top, a dress shirt, and a short skirt with a wide sash holding the top and skirt together. She completed her outfit with dark stockings and black shoes. It was Wendy Marvel, the Sky Dragon Slayer. Can I help you? It was clear she had come to try her luck, but what could a girl like her possibly offer in return for her money? And Naruto-sensei, can you to tell the truth, Wendy was a little terrified the way Naruto was looking at her. His eyes only made her worse because they were icy cold and devoid of emotion when he wasn't laughing. Do you have self-confidence issues? Naruto asked before looking away. Too bad, you can't win her back like this. But money is everything Carla and I have. Wendy tried to argue. You can't. Her eyes widened as she saw Naruto's hand directly in front of her face. Faster than he could react, he smacked her forehead so hard she was knocked to the ground, clutching her forehead in pain. Don't bother. I'm actually more stubborn than that brat over there, so you can't argue with me about something like this. He summoned Wendy's money and waved it around. You look like such an ass. Carla, Wendy exit, appeared at her side, her paw pointed at Naruto, saying sternly, why are you so stingy with her? I said I didn't like cat meat, that didn't mean I couldn't eat it. The white man was taken down by his words. So, would you like to be cooked with an apple in your mouth? Some laughed, thinking it was a joke, while many others didn't find it funny at all. Scarlet Urza was one of them. She was back eating her favorite dish again, but her full attention wasn't focused on it. Instead, her mind was focused on Naruto and his magic during his fight against Natsu. In one way, the way Naruto handled his magic was very similar to how she switched between armors to use different types of magic. He could use a lot of elemental magic. She, too, could use a lot of elemental spells because of her armor. He was fast, and while she doubted she could be as fast, she could increase her speed with some of her armor. The same could be said for physical strength and defense. Nevertheless, she had the feeling that this spelling was not the full extent of his power, and he still had many tricks up his sleeve. There was something she wanted to confirm. Suddenly, Urza stood up from her table and walked over to Naruto's. Then, before he could say anything, she summoned a silver sword into existence, and with lightning-fast reflexes, she stabbed him through his table, shattering it in the process. Her action shocked everyone except Naruto, who quickly grabbed his bowl of cookies and cup of tea without spilling a drop. "Is it necessary?" Naruto asked, looking at her. The fairy queen's expression turned serious as she steeled her black eyes upon him. "Naruto," Urza announced, "I challenge you to a one-on-one battle." "So?" Mikao commented. Urza never challenges anyone. This is usually a different story. "I can't believe it." Lucy, who had returned to the guild just a second before Urza had declared her challenge, yawned in surprise. Did Urza really only challenge Naruto? Naruto didn't answer right away. Instead, he gave Mira the tea and biscuit before the request. "Why should I fight you? Like I said, you had nothing to." "This isn't about Minato-sensei." Urza shook her head. "I want to fight him because I want us back," she declared firmly. "Is this so?" Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Yes, if I win, you have to give us back my money and Wendy's return." "Hey. What about me?" the gray color shouted. "And gray too." Urza quickly added, "I want them back." "So what if I win?" "We'll pay for your meals for the rest of the month." She answered without thinking, causing Naruto to smile contentedly. Lucy almost dropped her book, Wendy and Gray gasped, and it seemed they wanted to argue, but a quick flash from her was enough to shut them up. "How about it? Will you accept? Or are you scared you'll get your ass kicked by your father's student?" "Alright Urza," Naruto said. "But let me warn you, though, at most." Those 4 words caused the members of Team Natsu to tremble terribly. For the second time that day, the fairy tale was treated with hospitality. But they all understood that the next battle was going to be much more exciting. From beyond the crowd, Kana could see the increasing bets from other guild members who had split into 2 factions. One side was betting their money on Urza, while the other was betting on Naruto. Natsu and the gray-colored one, along with Lucy and Wendy, were among the group betting on Urza because first, they didn't want to lose any more of their money, and second, they doubted he could win against her. After all, she was one of the girls who had haunted them and tormented their nightmares since they were children. The other was Mira, but she had changed and become a sweet angel. Master Makarov and Fellas were part of the small group that bet on Naruto. Mira had her money on Naruto as well, but only enough for about 100 jewels. This was part of the money Naruto had given her, so she wasn't too worried about losing it. "I don't know if this is such a good idea," Lucy said nervously as she looked at Urza and Naruto, who stood facing off in the middle of the battlefield. "Fine," Urza, Naruto said as he slashed around her neck. "Same rule. You land a hit or leave a scratch on me, you win." "Still very confident, aren't you?" Urza asked as she pointed her sword at him. "Fine then, so be it. All bets are on." Kana shouted. Once Master Makarov heard Kana's announcement, he stepped forward from the front of the crowd and raised his hand, deciding to be the one to announce that the match this time begins. In a flash, Urza re-equipped her armor and charged into Naruto, re-equipping her armor using his magic. In a flash, the armor Urza now wore featured very few weaponized parts, with the breastplate shaped like a very revealing cheetah, the top of which was decorated with armor, with some bare armor protruding from the top of it, corresponding to her breasts, and some fur striping the lower edges. There was no waist guard, the armor instead sporting a pair of revealing black shorts, with a belt holding a cloth that hung over Urza's left leg connected to them. The outfit had a large collar around Urza's neck and a tail hanging from the back of her shorts, both made of thick fur, plus a pair of large cheetah ears adorning either side of Urza's head. Urza summoned the spear that came with her armor and tried to stab him with it at high speed, but Naruto was even faster. He swiftly moved his body out of the way, then grabbed her wrist to pull her toward him. Urza knelt hard on his stomach, coughing in pain, a swordswoman's cough, before being knocked to the ground by an elbow to the back. Urza gritted her teeth and quickly summoned swords, wielding them with her feet, wielding the hilts between her big toe and second toes. She placed her hands on the ground and spun her body with her legs in the air, trying to slash him with the newly summoned sword, hoping it would catch him off guard. He didn't do this, and she waited so long. He summoned a sword and easily parried the sword strike to her left foot before following up with the right. Urza twisted her body around, slashing with her left and right swords, but he dodged and blocked them as quickly as she delivered the blows. She rose and began adding the knives in her hands to the attack. An opening. Urza's eyes widened as she saw Naruto drop his left shoulder. Quickly seizing her opportunity, she rolled in that direction and slashed her sword down. "Bad," Naruto suddenly said, as if he could read her mind. "This is a decoy," he said and summoned the second sword in his hand. This one, however, was a broadsword and was much, much larger than any sword she had in her arsenal. It had two cutting edges that were off power, a circle near the top, a semicircular one closer to the hilt, and an extremely long handle. Sparks flew between them as Naruto raised his sword as if it were Urza's knives, weightless and blocked, and thrust into her back. Wielding it with only one hand, Naruto leaped toward her and slashed down. Urza instantly transformed her armor into the purgatory armor and brought up to block Naruto's much larger weapon into a spiked mace. However, the strike came far, far stronger than she anticipated. It was so powerful that her mace was knocked away from her body, numbing her hands. Naruto continued to wield the blade with mastery and strength beyond anything she had ever witnessed. How he could wield such a sword with only one hand and with such speed without tiring was beyond her comprehension. However, it was the least of her worries as she feared that the slightest touch would leave her with a gruesome wound or worse, amputation, so she re-equipped her armor back into the flight armor and dodged as fast as she could. "You have good reflexes," Naruto commented as he lowered his sword, instantly switching his hand to slash at her. Urza was able to dodge it, but a few strands of her hair weren't lucky enough to catch her. "My father trained you well, didn't he?" "Absolutely." Urza gritted her teeth as she was forced back. "That's why I can't lose to you." She raised her hand and summoned multiple swords into the air. "What are you going to do with them?" Naruto sneered as Urza hurled them at him from every direction, but the blonde easily deflected them by twirling his sword around and performing several strikes. "It's useless." "Bad." Urza screamed as she lunged at him and began mercilessly slashing at him from every direction with two long swords. "This is a decoy," she yelled, and with a devastating slash, she knocked her sword away from his hand. As her eyes flashed happily after the flick of her sword in the air, she didn't see the laughter appear on Naruto's face as he glared at her. It didn't last long, and it vanished immediately when she turned her attention back to him. She slashed her swords horizontally, but she had learned that such an attack wasn't going to do much against him. So she changed her strategy. She decided to fight him with something else. At the same time, she understood that she had to end the fight as quickly as she could. Her body was bathed in light and she re-equipped her armor once more. Before her new armor could fully appear on her body, Urza had already summoned her weapons and blamed Naruto. "Alright." Natsu and Fellas cheered when they saw the armor Urza was wearing. "What is that armor?" Lucy could only ask in surprise. Looking around, she could see that the others shared the same expression. It appeared that only Natsu and Fellas knew about this. Naruto didn't hesitate for a second. He summoned his own weapon and attacked Urza as she passed him in a blur. The red-haired woman stopped a few feet behind Naruto and a moment of silence passed between them before Urza broke it. "I knew it," Urza said with a small, satisfied smile. "You really are a shinobi." The armor she wore was what people of ancient times would call ninja attire, consisting of a black kimono-style sleeveless upper arm warmers, black metal scale-like arm guards and shin guards, and black tabi with wuragi. She completed her outfit with a black scarf, which she wrapped around her neck and extended down to her thighs. And in his hand was a kunai, one of the ninja's signature weapons, identical to the one Naruto held in his hand. "I didn't know my old man would go this far." He turned to look at his clothes before the smile faded. He closed his eyes, chuckling softly as he raised his hand and wiped the blood that had trickled down the small cut on his cheek. He could have made it heal instantly, but he didn't. "Well, I guess this makes you the winner." The moment Natsu asked if he was a ninja, he immediately understood it was Urza, and the armor she wore gave him that impression. "You let your master hit you and missed her intentionally, you, the master?" Sayla asked, and Naruto could only nod his head in response. "You're just too soft sometimes." "Well, you know I can be as hard as a rock too." Naruto joked, but the Aetherius didn't find it funny. "When this comes to people I care about, I just can't help you, you know," he stated gently, stroking Sayla's cheek with his thumb. Her expression immediately brightened as he stood up from his seat and took off his shirt. "Come on, let's not waste any more time." He quickly picked her up and took her into the bedroom with him. "I only hope you know what you're doing, master." End of chapter 5. Chapter 6. Where is everyone? When Naruto stepped into the guild that morning, he was rather surprised to find the place almost empty, save for Murahin and the other couple, who were cleaning up around the bar. Team Natsu was nowhere to be found either, which was quite disappointing, because he had really been looking forward to a conversation with Urza about her Kunoichi armor. "Good morning, Naruto-kun." Mira spoke, eliciting a nod from Naruto in response before answering his question. The master returned with some new missions for the guild, so everyone has already left to complete them. As you can see, everyone is close to bankruptcy, so we have to do our best to regain our former reputation. Naruto nodded in understanding. Although Natsu and his team left earlier this morning, I haven't heard from them yet. Mira said as she placed a finger to her lower lip, tilting her head to the side with a thoughtful expression. I see. Naruto looked at the beautiful waitress. And what about you? Oh, me? I have something else to do today, so I can't continue any mission. Mira replied with a sweet laugh before continuing, besides, I'm not too worried about money like everyone else, so I've decided to stay for a while and help my friends clean up the mess the others left behind after the game. Oh yeah, I almost forgot you're a part-time model. Naruto laughed and then asked, so the pay's okay? For a supermodel. Mira raised her hand in the air, striking a definite pose. Confidant, right? Naruto laughed quietly and Mira winked at him. The girl has the right to take pride in her beauty, right? She asked, laughing softly. Anyway, is there anything there you'd like? I'm almost done with cleaning, so I can make you a plate for breakfast. The waitress offered with a laugh. Big, but something you have in mind should be fine, Naruto said as he took a seat. I'll be back in a moment. After saying this, Mira disappeared behind the counter and made her way into the kitchen. Since everyone had eaten almost everything at the game the day before and Loki hadn't returned from the market yet, her options were rather limited, but she had a specific dish for Naruto in mind, and luckily, Mira found everything she needed in the pantry to cook him a perfect breakfast. She had only made this dish a few times in the past, but she was confident in her abilities. She made sure to make more than enough for Naruto. She didn't know how much he could eat or would eat in the morning, but it was clear to her he ate a lot, as she had learned yesterday. Everyone liked their cooking, and Naruto would definitely like this too. After a few minutes, Mira came out of the kitchen, carrying a tray of food in her hand. Here you go, Naruto-kun, she said cheerfully and placed it on Naruto's table. Okay, what do we have here? Naruto asked as he looked at what Mira had prepared for him. There was a plate on top of a bowl, which was the main course, a glass of milk, and a plate of chocolate chip cookies that had just been baked. You managed to make all of this in just a few minutes, I'm impressed, he said, removing the plate from the bowl. He raised an eyebrow when he saw what was inside. You got this from me, didn't you? He asked, turning to look at Mira, who just laughed in return. There was something that did not disappear even after a few thousand years. Ramen was one of them, and Mira had cooked him a very large bowl of shioi ramen, with an egg, 4 slices of pork, chopped green peppers, lots of vegetables, mainly salads, and a topping that Naruto was very familiar with, crickets. Do you like it? She asked, handing Naruto her chopsticks and spoon. Well, I have to try it first before giving the cook the feedback she deserves. Naruto lowered his head and took in the delicious smell. This smells good, no surprises, he said, and Mira nodded happily. Mixing the noodles, broth, and toppings with chopsticks and a spoon, Naruto then picked up some noodles and twisted them around his chopsticks before putting them in his mouth, noisily drinking over the strands that stuck out. Naruto then ate a whole slice of pork, some salad, and a piece of cricket before finishing with a spoonful of broth. Delicious. She didn't know why, but she had a feeling that she had cooked for a professional. Look. Naruto glanced at her, before a small grin crept back as he held her hand to make sure he didn't spill anything from his mouth. It's bloody delicious, Naruto finally said, making Mira clap her hands together in front of her and laugh happily. The broth is amazing, perfectly blended with the noodles, which you made from scraps, right? Mira nodded, beaming at him. The pork is cooked well, and I just like the amount of crickets you put in this. No pun intended, but I like crickets. They add a nice touch to my name. The immortal shinobi chuckled quietly. In my opinion, the vegetables aren't necessary, but I won't complain, because they add some wholesome touches to the dish. He pushed the vegetables out with his chopsticks, but ate them at the end. Great effort. I can see most of your cooking skills. This isn't the best thing I've ever eaten, but you take me to heaven with that. This was no softening of the blow. Mira's ramen was far from the best he'd ever tasted, but it was something he'd actually like to have every day, or at least every morning. A hit, I mean you sound like you know what you're talking about, and the tasting. I was hoping for something like this, but you sound like a real professional food critic, Naruto-kun. She admitted sincerely as Naruto returned to eating his breakfast. I'm very serious when it comes to ramen, Mira. Naruto shrank back. In fact, with thousands of years of experience, he could judge any dish. He could give the best review anyone could get unless they did something new, something he'd never seen before. This was my absolute favorite food in the world when I was young. Ramen means a lot to me. Is this how it is? Mira asked, panting slightly. She hadn't expected this. Did you know that when I was 12, I was this tall because I had ramen for every meal, every day? Naruto explained.